I'm going to call this Board of Animal Health meeting to order. Welcome to Riverview in Morris, Minnesota. This meeting has been posted in all of the appropriate channels. So I think we'll start with introductions. Before we get started, I'm Erika Sawatzke. I'm president of the board members, cooking producer from Kensington. So welcome to my neck of the woods. It's kind of nice not to have to drive into the Twin Cities somewhere. So this is my first meeting as president, and I'd like to publicly thank Dean for being a great leader on the board and serving this position well. So,
okay. Dr. Jessica Fox. I'm a veterinarian in Southwest Minnesota. I mixed animal veterinarian, and I also teach at the new South Dakota 2+2 program.
Alex Stady, cattle producer from Shakopee, Minnesota. Also a member of the Shakopee Milwaukee Soup Committee.
Dean Compart from Nicollet, Minnesota. I'm involved in the family-owned swine breeding stock operation with two brothers, a son and a nephew. We also are involved in our own branded pork program where we sell pork into white tablecloth restaurants and retail stores around the country. And I started my 12th year and here on the board, and it's just good to be here.
Molgaard, I'm the dean of the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine.
Rovira, I'm the interim director at the Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory at the University of Minnesota.
Dr. Erik Jopp, assistant director for Veterinary.
Linda Glaser, assistant director, Board of Animal Health.
Myah Walker, compliance unit supervisor for Minnesota Board of Animal Health.
I'm Schmidt. I'm the business manager at the Board of Animal Health.
Michael Crusan, communications director at the Board of Animal Health.
Erin Kreider, communications specialist at the Board of Animal Health.
Good morning, I'm Courtney Wheeler, senior veterinarian with the Board of Animal Health.
I'm Marion Garcia. I'm the new state veterinarian with the Board of Animal Health.
Shauna Voss, I'm a senior veterinarian with the Board of Animal Health. And Veronica Bartsch, senior veterinarian with the Board of Animal Health.
Steve Just, district veterinarian at USDA of Voss.
Brian Hayes, senior veterinarian with Minnesota Board of Animal Health. Bill Lowe, retired board.
Brenda Harkoff, Minnesota Elk Breeders Association.
Elaine Hanson, Minnesota Pet Breeders Association, and Minnesota Council of Dog Clubs.
and we have Dr. Hawkins online that she can introduce herself.
Dr. Peggy Ann Hawkins here in Northfield, Minnesota. Hello, everybody. And I'm a livestock veterinarian specializing mostly in swine, and also a microbiologist for a manufacturing plant, pharmaceutical manufacturing plant for livestock here in Northfield, Minnesota. And I would love to have been with you guys, but I'm 8 days out from some surgery and doing great. So everything's good.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Hawkins. Moving on the agenda, we have a motion to approve the minutes from our April 12th meeting.
I so moved.
For a second,
I'll second.
is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from our August 17th special meeting? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right, do we have Michelle available for our legislative update?
Yes. Good morning. Thank you. I'm Michelle Medina. I'm the Director of Government Relations with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and I also serve the board, represent them as well as the legislature. So I have just a really quick update again. So just a reminder, we're still in the high path outbreak from this spring. Back on April 7th, we got $1 million put into the egg emergency account for response. And we had another $3 million on May 22nd at the very end of the last legislative session. So that's holding us over. We're dipping into those funds still. We still have funding, so that's helpful. So we're doing okay for now. And we'll kind of just see where this current outbreak goes from here. Additionally, we're working with the governor's office to waive hours of service for trucking to ensure that we have our trucks to move water, carcasses, anything that we need. So also working jointly with the board on making sure all of that is in order. Also for High Path, we are doing stakeholder calls every Friday at 2 p.m. with the board, DNR, Department of Ag. So if anyone wants to join those calls, I'll throw my email into the chat and people can send me an email and I'll get their email updated onto that list. So just to know those are going on. Another thing is that we are getting into the budget process. So we are doing the biennial budget for years 24 and 25 for that biennium. So that's a process we've been starting. We need to get those numbers to the Minnesota Management and Budget to their office by October 15th. So that is something we're working on as the department and also for the board. The next legislative session will start on Tuesday, January 3rd. That'll be the 93rd session. So it's mainly a budget year, but there'll also be policy. There's a chance there'll be bonding since bonding didn't pass last year. We don't really know for sure. It'll kind of depend on how the election goes in November. So we'll see where that goes. And then just that we're still working on legislative issues for coming up for this next session, closely with the board and that. And so we're excited to have Dr. Garcia to join us as well and looking forward to working with her next session. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for Michelle? Great. Thanks for your update, Michelle.
Of course, thank you.
Okay. And the Glaser, you're up next.
Hi, well, the big news, just a quick board update. The big news is we have a new state veterinarian in the office. And so Dr. Mary Garcia started Tuesday, the 12th. Is that right? And has been working, so she's been on board for a whole week and yeah, it's all ready to go, right? So anyway, I don't know if you want to take a minute to say some things and.
Yeah, hey, thanks. So I'm very excited to be here. Thanks, thanks for the opportunity. And I'll just say this publicly. Thanks to everyone on the team and the board at the office, helping me learn what I need to learn and helping me get on board. So thanks to all of you. I'm glad to join the team and got a lot to learn, but I'm jumping in with both feet. Of course, plenty of opportunities. Plenty of opportunities. Back to you, Linda.
Okay, so just some other things. Michelle mentioned high path AI funding through the legislature, and I'm kind of overlapping a little bit in some of Kara's territory here, but we don't have her update. She's updating on the bylaws. So we did receive cooperative agreement funding from USDA for high path AI, and that funding is primarily going toward paying overtime for employees to work on the response. The money coming through the Ag Emergency Fund, that's been covering the costs of the pre-movement testing, which is being done at the Minnesota Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. We have a little bit of supplies and other things in that funding we're doing, but Department of Agriculture is then paying for some of the response costs, foaming costs that wouldn't be covered by USDA testing costs, that sort of thing. So we've got, we're taking high path AI response costs out of a couple of different pots of money. And also we have had another sort of wave of vacancies that are posted for the board. So we're working with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and we are advertising a number of positions, including a temporary position for the Minnesota Poultry Testing Lab for the board to provide some support to Shauna and Krista that are, in the throes of the high path AI response. We've got 2 office staff, and in addition, 2 field staff, an agricultural advisor in the Rochester area, and a senior veterinarian, a district veterinarian in the main field. So some of those positions are being interviewed now, others are posted and will close in the next week. So that's sort of the next wave we're working on, and then from there, the vacancies that are remaining will be, Dr. Garcia will be looking at structure and kind of, going from there. Remaining vacancies. So, that's where we are there. I wanted to let the board know that I have set my retirement date for November 1st. So then I will be retiring at that time. So, Dr. Garcia knows that. I didn't surprise her today. Anyway, there's that, and we've, we're continuing to work on the other programs, and that's mainly the updates we have right now from the board. I don't know, anything, Kara, that you can think of left out of updates? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Any questions for me?
Question of how has there been good response or to the ads that we've had that have been out long enough where we should be closing some of those?
Yeah, so we currently are in the process of interviewing and selecting candidates for 2 office positions, and both of those positions received about 30 applicants each, which is significantly higher to our previous postings. I think it's the job market out there is changing significantly, and people are learning that they want to work for the state. So we are thrilled that it's able to help us select top candidates, because when you've got 30 applicants to pick for one person, you get to, go through a lot of different backgrounds and experience and try to find the best match, rather than just quote unquote, take what you can get, right? So we are hopeful that the other positions we have posted will also produce a number of applicants. We don't see who applies until the position closes. So we don't know who, if anyone has applied yet to those positions, but they've only been up for a couple of days, so.
And so the last time we hired an agriculture advisor was really essentially years ago.
It was before my time.
Yeah, I mean, in 2000, could have been with, during TV or something, probably, so 2007, 8 or something. That district veterinarians, been more recent, we hired Dr. Hoban. That was a companion animal focus in this past winter. But, it's been. So these positions, the field positions don't come up that quickly.
So your ag advisor position, what is that person's background? They're not necessarily going to be a veterinarian.
No, they wouldn't be a veterinarian. We're, maybe Kara can speak more to the job advertised, but we're looking for, agricultural experience. Part of that job is compliance related, so there's the regulations of the board.
It could be someone who maybe had some, relevant schooling or, farm experience, but maybe isn't exactly a veterinarian, right? Who decided maybe not to pursue that route, or is one of the many other positions someone can hold in agriculture. So we're looking for someone who has some sort of background in the ag world, who understands how these premises work, and so they can partner best with producers to make sure that we're able to make sure all of our regulations are followed or brought into compliance, so.
Who had held that position before?
Don Myron, he retired in May of 2021, so. Yeah, we had a number of departures over the last year.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So Linda, this is your last quarterly board meeting.
Right. You're gonna have a big storm and a snowfall or whatever in December. Go for it. And thank you to the board. I have, certainly enjoyed my employment with the board. It's been a lot of interesting things and a lot of things to learn, and always, a problem to solve and something to, to work on. So I've it's never been a dull moment. And so I'll have been working for the board 18 years. And so one of the places I worked at the longest in my career.
I'd just like to thank you for your service to the board.
Sure.
You know, you've been in positions where, I know you've moved in and out as the director, if Dr. Thompson was gone and kind of took over the Cervid program and after the OLA, and I think you've been a real positive force in the board, and wish you well.
Yeah, thanks. Yep, I'm forward to the next things.
Yeah.
Well, Dean said it best, so I don't need to repeat anything. We will move on to Steve Just for the USDA.
Thank you. Aaron? Good morning. Again, I'm Dr. Steve Just, District Veterinarian with USDA. I'm filling in for Dr. Schaefbauer, who is our area veterinarian in charge. It's been a while since I've been to one of the meetings, and many new faces, board and board. So I apologize if I use acronyms or spell things out too much. So there's a few items that she wanted me to go over and update on, but there's a couple of things that I also wanted to add. Oh, thank you. Like Dr. Glaser had said, a few positions to fill on the board side, on the USDA side. Also, we have positions to fill. And as I was describing to Dr. Garcia earlier, that the relationship between the board and the USDA veterinary services here in Minnesota, from my perspective, when I travel the country and talking to my colleagues in other states, I think we have an excellent relationship. And as far as the workload out in the field, it's shared. 80–90% of the work is shared. So we're interchangeable and work side by side. So it's fantastic. And the amount of resources that we have in the field, the number of personnel, it's considerably more than many other states, but we also have a workload there. It goes to the different diverse livestock in Minnesota and some of the other activities. So again, it's a very good relationship, and there's a lot of work out there. So it's been good. And I too have been appreciative working with Linda for almost the same amount of time. I've been here 18 years. So
Even longer, we knew each other.
That's right.
Been, yeah.
So I got a question. So the USDA is celebrating 20 years of the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, which we are fortunate to have 2 labs. And I can speak on any of this, Shauna. Thank you. So we, again, the National Animal Health Laboratory Network was formed obviously in 2002. Best part of this, it's partnership obviously between USDA, Diagnostic Laboratories, and the American Association of Veterinary Laboratory Diagnosticians. What I really want to emphasize here is the early detection of high consequence disease. So from my perspective as a field veterinarian, and I think for the board as well, having a Nolan lab or 2 in Minnesota, what that allows us to do is if we have a foreign animal disease investigation, we're able to go out and collect samples, bring them into one of our labs and get lab results most times that day, depending on when they're able to get there. And it's a very good relationship in with the laboratory. We have a group of people that we're able to contact, let the lab know, and they get things set up, and it works very well. So for producers, we're able to get those results quickly. Fortunately, if they're negative or if they're positive, we're able to do a rapid response and start getting work on the eradication. We also, at the same time, will send samples out to foreign animal disease laboratory, Plum Island generally, sometimes depending on these names. So it's very fortunate that, again, that we have those laboratories here. So This is a little busy slide, but that shows where the non-labs throughout the United States are. Not each lab tests for every disease, so these are some of the diseases. And I apologize, it's kind of hard to read and to see. So, for example, U of M does not test for BSC, which fortunately we're not, have a plethora of samples going in for that. However, we do have a good surveillance system in place for BSC. Okay, so if you hadn't heard, we have had high path avian influenza in Minnesota this year and throughout the rest of the country. Again, from my perspective, being here in 2015 as well and throughout the country, the unfortunate thing with high path is how widespread it has been this year. And I don't have the numbers, but almost every state in the country, Shauna, right? And that has created a challenge of allocating resources. So to address it, USDA Vet Services, we are implementing a case control study to look at risk factors, biosecurity challenges within table egg layer systems. And unfortunately, we have cases from 2015, we have cases from 2022 now, so we have a lot of premises that we can look at and hopefully generate some good data and maybe identify some of our weaknesses that we might be able to implement better biosecurity going forward. Obviously, we got turkey prems as well that have been affected, and we are starting to look at doing a case control study for them as well. The table egg layer study, I believe, will be beginning the end of September. Turkey study is hoping for sometime in October. Traceability is, imagine most people are familiar with animal disease traceability. It's been in place, Linda, for a while, in whatever format. One of the big changes going forward is that proposed change is that ID has to be visual and electronic. We had originally moved to electronic several years ago. That was put on hold. So it was just visual, but we mean it this time. Hopefully that we can actually get that approved and passed. We do have, to that end, the low frequency RFID tags that are available to all cattle producers for heifer. Courtney handles that distribution in Minnesota here.
Actually, Kelly and I said this.
Yeah. And so last year, FY 21, we distributed almost 8 million tags. This year, we're down just over 3 million. So not exactly sure what the change was, or how many more will be allocated for next year. So it's 3 tags. Courtney, do you have anything else on?
I just wanted to add that I think the biggest disappointment for producers is that they're only for replacement numbers. I think if USDA could come up with a way to offer tags for,
And are they just the buttons that we have?
yeah, they'd have to pay extra to get the
Bangle.
tag.
That's.
And there, my understanding was there's a real shortage with supply stuff. So I think that's the reason for the 3 million tag, the drop in tags. They were waiting for components to deal with.
I haven't talked to Kelly to see if there's been west, I guess, in Minnesota, or how that, I don't know how many have been distributed.
I have those numbers. I can get them for the board members if they would like. I'm having a partner.
Oh, thank you. That's all from USDA. Any questions?
Are you anticipating any changes with swine relative to how things are done now?
As far as identification?
Yeah, traceability.
Not that I'm aware of, no. And I think the PIN system seems, my understanding and experience seems to be working well. That was, more of a producer or industry driven, right? But it seems to be working.
So the 60-day comment period it won't be published before 2023, 60-day comment, and then they have to respond to the comments. What's the next timeline, do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
How long do your case studies take? What does that help us?
That's a good question. That might be a 60 days when we do NOMS, which is the National Animal Health Monitoring Service, where we do like industry surveys. It's looking at 2 or 3 month window to complete surveys. So you have the survey portion, and then the analyzing data and whatnot ends up being big. So, but I do know it put resources to it, and it is a priority. So that short, obviously, it's something that may not help with the fall, but others maybe answer that might be something in the spring that we're obviously we want it.
Thank you. Any more questions? Right, thank you for your update. Like we have Laura Molgaard for the College of Vet Medicine.
Hi, everyone, again. So Erin's pulling up my presentation. I'm happy to give you an update about what's been going on around the College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Minnesota, which, like all of your parts of the world, has been a busy place over the last several years and last several months. Things have been getting even more busy as we head back into a new semester. So, thank you. So I'll start with some good news. Our rankings continue to improve. Now, rankings are a bit of a mystery and a hard game to play because some of them are based on reputation, and we're not quite sure how reputation is evaluated and by whom. And they don't all happen on the same time frequency, but you can see that since these rankings last came out, we did climb in our rankings for all 3. Probably the one that matters, well, different stakeholders care about different rankings, but at the University of Minnesota, the Shanghai ranking is what the university looks at. And so that's just an example of why this can matter. This helps raise our reputation within our university as a valuable college that is worthy of investment. Students are more likely to look at US News and World Report. Other stakeholders might look at others, but so far so good. So as I mentioned, our students are back on campus, and that adds a new level of energy and busyness to all of our lives. This year, the class of 2026 saw a record number of applicants, over 1,400 applicants for 125 seats. So this is combining the SDSU applicants and the Twin Cities applicants, and I'll speak more about that partnership in a minute. We also have the highest number of first generation college students in our class this year, which is just reaching populations that hadn't been reached before. And in some cases, those are rural kids. So SDSU enrolled their second class, and this is a 2+2 program. So for those of you that haven't heard about our program before, so veterinary school is typically 4 years of undergraduate and then 4 years of veterinary school. So the SDSU partnership is what's called a 2+2. So the students spend the first 2 years in Brookings, and then they transfer to the St. Paul campus, the Twin Cities campus, for the second 2 years, and will get their diploma from the University of Minnesota. So this is a partnership designed to increase the workforce. There are pretty significant workforce shortages in the veterinary profession. And with specific goal of serving the upper rural Midwest. And these are just some pictures of their very beautiful new facilities. Dr. Voss is one of the faculty who is teaching in that program. So that program has just admitted their second class or just started their second class in August. And so now they have their full complement of 40 students, and that will add to our class size beginning next fall. The veterinary well-being is a hot topic in the profession, with mental health concerns and suicide rates being higher than in similar professions. And as a result, colleges across the country are investing more in well-being support. And so we have done that as well, with an increase from 1 person to 2.5 FTE, supporting not only student well-being, but well-being in general, including we have a veterinary medical social worker in the upper left there who works with clients and with faculty and staff, and helping with clients who are having difficulty with end-of-life decisions, for example, and then supporting and educating students about how to manage that kind of challenge or moral stress. We have a director of student well-being and success, which is broader than well-being, but includes well-being, also academic success. And then we have a new shared embedded counselor shared with the School of Dentistry half-time to help provide more targeted kind of counseling for professional students who have unique needs, in addition to the university's overall programs. This is a slide that was just a quick selection of a few research projects highlighting the work that our faculty do, supporting animal health, focusing on these particular studies range from an antimicrobial study looking at the prescribing pattern of companion animal veterinarians who serve dogs, cats, horses, etc., and looking at prescribing patterns with an effort to combat antimicrobial resistance. Growth, a PRRS, porcine reproductive respiratory syncytial virus in the swine industry, COVID studies. COVID is primarily, obviously a human infection, but can affect animals as well. And then some new work happening in African swine fever. But again, these are just a tiny snapshot of the, I think it was, I just looked yesterday, 374 publications our faculty did over the last year, over the last academic year, and across a whole range of topics, both applied, like this, and basic sciences. Chronic wasting disease is a priority for the board, so I included an update here about our MinPro, Minnesota Prion Research and Outreach Group, led by Dr. Peter Larson, who you've talked to in the past. They have a new website for Cervid farmers. They are continuing to test Sentinel technology, and the evaluation of the 4-hour field test, the rapid field test, is complete. They received more legislative funding to advance their work, and we engage our students in this work as well, and we have for many years in helping with sample collection during the deer season. Our veterinary medical center is a big part of our college in the training of our veterinary students. Our veterinary residents, our future specialists, providing compassionate care for animal owners and advancing clinical research. And as you can see here, we are one of the busiest, if not the busiest, veterinary medical centers in the country. I've been really happy that over the last year or so, as the world has kind of opened back up again, I've been able to get out more and get to reacquaint myself with or reintroduce myself to our many, many partners that help advance our mission and that we support in advancing their mission. And finally, our 75th anniversary. Our college has been in place since 1947, so this is our 75th anniversary. Over that time, we have graduated over 5,000 veterinarians and 1,000 biomedical scientists. And we have provided countless care to countless animals, meaning too many to count, too numerous to count, whether that be clinical care or diagnostic services and advanced new knowledge through research and discovery. This is just a picture of our kind of picnic for our faculty, staff, and students. And then on that same day, we also had some kind of fun and activities. I formed a fun committee because I'm the last person to do anything fun. So I formed a fun committee to help plan this. They came up with all kinds of great events, including a band that included some of our faculty members there and a dunk tank. As you can see from my picture there with Goldie, I look a little bit like a drowned rat because I was in the dunk tank for a half an hour. And I didn't picture that being, you can dunk me as many times as you want for half an hour, but that's exactly what it was, which was actually a pretty good core workout, climbing back up onto that seat over and over and over again. So
That was your fun for that event or?
yes, that was my fun to get dunked. Yep. No, it was actually, the fun part was getting to see people outdoors, smiling in the sunshine after the last 2.5 years of a lot of really, really hard work, kind of slogging through. So this was great to see people, in community with each other. And then finally, before I turn things over to Dr. Rovira, we've had a transition in our veterinary diagnostic lab leadership with the departure of Dr. Jerry Torreson, who is left the college and the university for private industry and a new adventure. We are extremely grateful for his time at the college, and we are extremely grateful to Dr. Rovira for taking over as interim director after being assistant director for a few years. This adds to the number of people on the CVM senior leadership team that I am searching for and hiring. And so now we're back up to 5 searches. We were down to 4 for a short time. And unlike the experience you're having with your staff searches, these searches are taking much longer than normal in all of veterinary education and higher education in general. Faculty searches are taking longer with fewer applicants. And so I will be very happy when these positions are all filled and we're back up to full strength. But I'm extremely grateful to the interim leadership that's filling in the meantime. So I will turn things over to, I'll ask, are there any questions for me? Yeah.
2+2 program, is that modeled after a program elsewhere? Or
Yes.
It is.
Yes, there are other 2+2 programs around the country. There's one with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Iowa State. There's one in Utah, Alaska, with Colorado, in Texas with Texas A&M and their Canyon campus. So there are a number of programs and they all have a slightly different approach. So they're not quite a cookie cutter, but we aren't the first to do that.
So my next question would be for
Yeah.
Dr. Fox. You teach what courses and are you teaching in both freshman, first and second year?
Yeah, so this semester I'm teaching clinical skills to first year and then professional development, the whole curriculum for the first and second year students. And then next semester, a class is called Thrive. So it's dentistry, nutrition, and behavior. And then a kind of a non-traditional pets. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
If I can follow up on that, what is the enrollment at SDSU?
So 20 students per class.
And way too soon to tell. I mean, obviously, we're able to add the numbers into the
Yeah.
veterinary profession. Percentage then that goes.
Go right to the upper rural Midwest. Yes, that'll be exactly. And my hunch is that process will be refined over time. Launching a brand new program in the middle of a pandemic has been very challenging for both of our institutions. And so we've been in the early years less focused on the nuanced goals and more focused on hiring faculty, getting facilities in place, recruiting students, et cetera. And then I think, but it's not that we're ignoring that, we're doing advising. So Dr. Tim Goldsmith, one of our ruminant faculty, beef faculty, has been one of our advisors who goes to Brookings and meets with the students early on to talk about kind of career planning and how to be thinking about what kind of experiences to be getting while they're in school and what kind of classes they'll be able to choose from once they get to Minnesota to be able to track. And so I think that we're walking and we'll be running in a few years.
I would say in the first cut, just note, so for professional development, I really want to understand what their career goals are so I can help them if I have connections for in the first class. Definitely the majority are very rural based and want to come home after, and the majority are mixed animal or large animal focused, and a couple of exceptions, but especially the first year class is very that. So now second year, I guess, but the first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, one of the other challenges that the profession faces, or that rural communities and the profession face, is the college can do its part to recruit and educate the students. And then the communities need to be creating supportive communities that are going to recruit somebody to stay in that community. And that's the other challenge. And I have those conversations with people quite often when they, whether it's a chamber of commerce or, you know, another community leader saying, we are going to lose our last bet when he retires and he's already such and such years old. And we have not been able to recruit. There's one story in particular that comes out occasionally about a practice owner trying to give their practice away to a new graduate. And there, it's a complicated situation. I mean, it's a multifactorial situation. It's not just about the number of veterinarians. It's also about, you know, are there spousal jobs in that community? Is there childcare? Is there, you know, a network of practices that can support each other? Because the old model that is no longer attractive to the next generations of being on call 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, is less attractive to a new graduate, especially somebody who hasn't had any experience yet to kind of be on their own out there. So we need to be having those conversations as well as we look at the rural veterinary shortage, and of course, loan forgiveness, tuition, many other factors as well.
The 20 positions that you have annually there, are they held strictly for South Dakota, for South Dakota kids and families?
They want to recruit as many South Dakota and neighboring states students as possible, but like all other veterinary schools, like most other veterinary schools, I should say, because there are a couple exceptions, there are some national applicants as well. And so it's a mix of both, and I think it'll change from year to year, but over time, one of the things that we've been talking about is the Twin Cities campus, the mothership, University of Minnesota, has a program called VetFast, Food Animal Scholars Track, that is about identifying really food animal and mixed animal interested students early on, as early as possible, high school, early undergraduate, and then mentoring and recruiting and providing them essentially a provisional acceptance that there's a seat for them when they're ready to come to vet school. And what we do for that is we don't hold a specific number of seats for VetFast. As many qualified VetFast students as we get, fill the class first, and then we fill the rest with regular applicants. So I think they may be considering that as well. Any other questions?
Back here.
Yeah.
You mentioned the value for our tests and is that something that's still in stages, or is that getting to the near
And states where they can start utilizing it, or does it need approval first?
Yeah, I think maybe Dr. Rovira will be more qualified to talk about that, or we can have Dr. Larson back sometime. But I do know that there's more than just the scientific, confirmation for things like that. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not the final stop.
What I'm learning, and I'm still learning about this, and I'm sure Linda can help as well, is there's a scientific part that Dr. Larson is doing, and then there's the USDA verification that they are working on at the same time. And what I've been hearing from different people is that the USDA verification is going to take very long. And so we have that as an objective for the lab to be using that test, but that's a more long-term objective because it sounds like that is taking some time, and we need to have plans for the people that can use as an official test.
Could it be used for the DNR testing sooner than on the farm testing? If it's not approved USDA wise, can the DNR utilize the testing?
What do you think? You probably know more about
You
this.
were asking if the DNR does the ELISA testing already, right? For their surveillance as a primary test. You're asking about the RT quick then?
No, the 4-hour test, it's 4-hour field test. I know they were.
Oh,
Dr. Larson's been trying to develop a field test for.
Yeah, but would it be approved for use
Yeah.
in the field yet, or does it have to be USDA approved before it could be used?
well, DNR doesn't need, their surveillance for wild deer USDA doesn't have any.
Right, absolutely.
So, but, that's not an ELISA, it's a color test, but it's not an ELISA, structure test is what I'm understanding. It's something a little different than that. So where.
Would the DNR want to use that in the field?
Right.
Before it's been evaluated? I don't know.
Yeah, I think they would have to understand where that test is at, and they said sensitivity and specificity.
Right.
I don't know. And I know that they were working with, hunter harvesting even as long as a couple of years ago. So, Peter Larson was down in southeastern Minnesota, and they were collecting some of those samples from, the cervids that were brought in, for, lymph node collection and testing. So I think they are using,
But is a practical use test, I think is maybe what you're asking, as opposed to in research studies. Yeah, I think that's a broader question of what, under what circumstances, but I'm sure Dr. Larson would be happy to come back and talk again. I know we talked to the board in St. Paul, whenever that was, it was winter time.
We have, I
Erik
think,
Hildebrand is on the agenda.
yeah, Erik Hildebrand with the DNRs on the agenda.
Oh, great.
later today,
Okay.
so we
Can ask that question there.
question.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Great. We'll move on to the diagnostic lab update with Rovira.
Thank you. So, thank you, Laura, and I don't have a PowerPoint, but I do have a few notes with updates I want to share with you. First of all, thank you for the invitation and a very short introduction about myself. I'm a veterinarian originally from Spain, but I've been here in Minnesota for the last 20 years now. And for the last 13 years, I've been working at the diagnostic laboratory, mainly as a swine diagnostician. The last 3 years, I've been the assistant director working with Jerry Torrison. And very recently, Jerry Torrison told me, in a month, I'm out of here. And so Laura asked me to be intern. So that's the story there. Let me update you a little bit on a couple of things that we have going on at the VDL. First of all, I'll start with the challenges. Hopefully, I'll finish with the other things that get us more excited, the good news. But to start with the challenges, first one is obviously Dr. Torrison has left, and I'm taking over the interim position. What we're doing about that is I'm working with Dr. Molgaard to start a search for a new director. And I would ask all of you to help us recruit, to help us have very good candidates applying for this position. I think it's a very interesting position. We have a very good lab. And I think we might be able to recruit very good candidates. But again, I've been insisting to Dr. Molgaard that I know that we have many open positions, but I think this is a very important one, both for the college and for the state. And so any help that you can give to help this search would be appreciated. We find sometimes that these searches, even if you have a firm helping you, sometimes word of mouth helps too, and you sometimes get the best applicants by connections. And so keep that in mind. Think of good applicants that would be good potential directors for the diagnostic laboratory. So that's the first challenge that we're dealing with. The second challenge I wanted to share with you is shortly after Dr. Dorison left, we had another person leaving, Dr. Shepers. Many of you will know him. Has decided to leave the lab for a job at the private industry. He's going to be working on a company that does research for dairy cows. And that's a big loss for the lab. Jeremy has been with the lab for 20 plus years. He was, among many things that he did in the lab, he was our main ruminant diagnostician. So we're going to have to try to fill that void that is living in that regard. The other thing that he was doing, again, among many other things, but one thing that I wanted to highlight is he was our expert in chronic wasting disease. That's my ignorance with some of these questions, but we're losing that expertise as well. So we're working on a plan to cover for that loss of expertise. We're gonna need another diagnostician that is trained to do the test that we offer at the VDL. You actually have to read slides under the microscope, and not everybody can do that. Usually one trained reader would train the next one. In this case, we don't have the opportunity to do that. So we're identifying who's going to be the next person in charge and how we're going to train that person, probably with the help of NBSL. So that's the plan in the medium term. In the short term, we're going to be outsourcing samples to Michigan State. We're in conversations with them. They are fine. We've done it in the past. And so that's the plan for the immediate need for testing for chronic wasting disease. Long term, we would like to utilize and apply the test that Peter Larson has developed. And we are actually, as part of the help from the legislature this year, we're actually buying the equipment to be able to run that test. Still, for that test to be officially recognized, it needs to be approved by the USDA. So we're also waiting to see, how that moves. It looks like it's moving slower than we wanted, but still, we want to be ready. Once that test is approved, we want to be ready to go ahead and use it at the lab. So that would be the long-term plan for testing. So those are some of the challenges that we're going through and how we're dealing with them. I guess I forgot to mention that for Dr. Shepard's position, we're opening a position for a food animal diagnostician to come and join the lab. That's another one that, again, Dr. Shepard is a big loss for the lab. But on the other hand, this is an opportunity to bring somebody new. We don't have opportunities to bring diagnosticians very often. I can't remember the last time we brought somebody in. And so this is another opportunity to recruit somebody with maybe a little bit of a different experience and expertise. So we're working on posting that position as well, together with the Department of Population Medicine. So that's for the challenges that we're dealing with right now. In addition, of course, with high-path avian influenza response, and there's somebody else is going to be talking about that later, so I don't get into too much detail about that, but that's keeping us very busy. So I'll just summarize very briefly what we've been doing in the two labs that we have. In St. Paul, we've been doing one round of testing per day at 7 a.m. Every weekday. And we've been doing some of the weekend testing also in St. Paul, especially Saturday. So we've tested the past 4 weekends. In Wilmar at NPPL, we've been doing 2 to 3 runs every day at 8 a.m., at noon, and at 3 p.m. And we've been doing the Sunday testing, so some of the sick bird testing and some of the movement testing that is needed on Sundays, we've been doing it over there as well. And so we're collaborating with the Board of Animal Health, seeing how it develops and what the needs are, and making plans to see what we need to do in ramp up the testing in the next weeks. So that's for HPAI. Another thing that's keeping us busy these days is boarding animal investigations, is keeping the Board of Animal Health vets busy and us at the lab busy. In particular, investigation of swine vesicular disease. This happens more or less every summer, but this is proving to be a challenging summer. I was looking at, well, let me back up. These are investigations of swine that have this vesicular disease, and we have to right away investigate whether this is foot-and-mouth disease or not. So these are samples that get collected by pony animal disease investigator and submitted to the lab. We run the test, make sure that they are not foot-and-mouth disease. In most of the cases, we also run the test for another virus, Seneca Valley virus. Most of the cases are positive for that other virus. So that's a problem we've been dealing with for the last few summers. Is this virus shows up in the summer and creates all this, confusion and for animal disease investigations. So again, most of them are Seneca Valley virus. We report the results. They found everything is negative for foot-and-mouth disease, doesn't have to quarantine, and we move on. So we do that same day or some days the next day in the morning. I was looking at the past 5-6 summers that we've been doing this, and so far we're already at number 2 in number of cases. And usually the season goes from July, August, September, October. So we still have 1 month to go. So this could actually end up being the busiest summer at the rate that we're going. I was counting 75 cases that we've worked on this summer for swine vesicular disease. I might have been actually missed the last couple of cases, so it's around 75. I think it was in 2017, we reached 100. So it could be that we're on those numbers. But anyway, that's another one that is keeping us busy these days in terms of regulatory disease. A couple other things that are keeping us busy. We had a big presence recently at the Swine Lemon Conference. This is a conference for veterinarians and producers that the college organizes for swine disease and production. The laboratory organized 2 different sessions. They went well, they were well attended. And the conference is a very successful conference. It brings people from all over the country and from over other countries as well. So we try to help with that every year. We have also in August, we also participated in the dairy conference and in the beef producers meeting that happened in campus. So that kept us busy during the summer as well with that type of work with outreach and contacting some of our clients that way. Now, very quickly, a couple of things that we have going on right now that are exciting for maybe for this next 6-9 months. We're working on the money that we got from the legislature the last time. We were fortunate to be granted $1.25 million for equipment. That wasn't our first need. We think we need more operating monies, but at that time there was an appetite for allocating monies for equipment, and that's what we went for. And we're very thankful that with your support too, we got Dr. Patterson got that money allocated to the diagnostic laboratory. So now we are in the phase of ordering some of the equipment that we can buy with that money, and also reviewing the list of equipment that we put together for the ask, and seeing if really that equipment is still what we need now. And like I said, starting to order all that equipment. I'm asking our section managers to think in terms of efficiency, not just what broke in the lab, not just what is all that needs replacement, but what can bring you to the next level. What is something that maybe in another situation you wouldn't be able to afford buying, but it would be a good investment that is going to pay off in the 5-10 years ahead. So this is, I think, a really good opportunity for us, and it's exciting. We're working on that. Another thing that we're working on, we got a grant from the CDC, and this is just 80K. So after I mentioned the $1.25 million, the 80K looks really small, but we did get some funding specifically to buy certain machines and certain PCR machines that will allow us to, we already have one of those, so this will give us a second machine that will allow us to run basically more PCRs with the same amount of effort and of people working at the lab. So again, looking for efficiency, and the justification for this is dealing with foreign animal disease. This particular one that comes from the CDC, the justification was COVID-19 and other infectious diseases that affect animals. We work a lot with other infectious diseases that affect animals, so we qualified, and that's what how we justify that one. So that's coming in too. We're ordering it. And a couple more things we have going on. We have Farmville brand to update our online submission form. So when our clients send samples to us, there's a lot of paperwork, that submission form, electronic paper, but we do have an online submission form that is very antiquated. And so what we're doing now, we've been wanting to renew it, but now we have the money, and it's going to happen this year. This is something that Dr. Thorson was leading. It's one of the things that might get a little bit delayed, but I need to push forward to make sure that it happens. Like I said, we do have the money. It's a lot of programming and computer stuff, but it's, to put a tool in front of our clients that they can use on their computer, make the submission, and that would help us improve a lot the quality of the data that comes in. As you your computer, and you can save information, save templates, that type of stuff. And finally, one more project we have going on, that we have extra funding for it for this year. We have a project to go to swine clinics, which are among our largest clients, and help them with sample submission. So the submission form, but also the samples, the communication, everything related to sample submission. The idea is to have them make better sample submissions so the whole diagnostic work is better. The idea also is, if they are really good at submitting samples in general, if we were to have foreign animal disease, African swine fever, for example, whatever part they take on that response, they would be better prepared to participate in the response and to have the sample submission. So it's also part of foreign animal disease in that regard. And those are the updates I have for you from the video. Any questions?
You mentioned Seneca Valley, and it's a vesicular disease, and it sounds like you're ruling out, or you're doing the testing and you're finding that it's Seneca. But it almost seems like there's maybe something that's a little bit unexplained, that it's not foot and mouth. Is there something new or something that is causing this that's not either FMD or Seneca? We just don't know what it is, or comment on that?
Yeah. We've found cases that are negative for both. I did mention that a second set of samples gets collected, like Dr. Gus said, they get sent to Plum Island. In some instances, those samples, if we find Seneca, they don't get tested. But in some other instances, if we if we don't find anything, and I don't know exactly, the selection process, but some of the samples, and particularly the ones where are negative for both viruses, they get tested over there at Plum Island as well. There are other vesicular diseases, so they test for those. I think in some of these cases, it might still be Seneca virus, and some of the epidemiology will tell you that it's probably Seneca virus. Sometimes the virus might not be there in that sample anymore, depending on the quality of the sample. But in the past, we have suspected that there might have been something else. And so we've been working in the past on types of parvovirus that can cause skin lesions that maybe they don't look quite like vesicles, but look like ruptured vesicles. And so there's some work looking into that. But especially this year, it seems to be pretty consistent. We still have some negative, but it's pretty consistent that most of the cases we will find Seneca virus there. And that is well characterized where documented that does cause vesicles. So we feel comfortable like calling it there as the cause of the vesicles. Get those quantities for Seneca virus.
I assume worldwide they deal with this too, or are we dealing with more of it here in this country than maybe are in other countries?
Well, that's an interesting question because what happened around the spring, I think it was around the spring, is we started getting calls and emails and diagnostic laboratories, some of them a little cryptic about information about Seneca virus testing, and can you share your protocol? And it's like, and so I got an email from Chile, and somebody got a call from Mexico, and we even got a call from UK asking for protocols. And then when I talked to my colleagues, it's like, yeah, me too. There's a lot of confidentiality, issues here. Some countries, they don't want to recognize that they have even Seneca. And then there's a lot of some of these countries import pigs from the US, and there's genetic companies involved in those movements. And so I always want to be very, very careful. And I am asked, do you have this disease here in the US? And it's no secret. Yeah, we have Seneca virus in the US. I always want to be very careful with people not making the connection like, oh, we're bringing pigs from the US, and now it's showing up here in, let's say, Chile or Brazil. It must come from. I don't get into that. But it is interesting that for like last year, it was quiet. This year, it's active here, but it's also active in many other countries. And you kind of learn through the COVID talk and so on in some cases. So, and we don't know, I thought you were going to ask about the seasonality. Why do we find this every summer and then it goes away and the next summer is a problem again? There's a lot of unknowns for this. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was wondering if you have residents currently at the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab, if you're still have the residency training program.
Yep, we do have a residency training program. We would like to have 2 residents per year. There's 3 years, so we would like to have a total of 6. Unfortunately, in the last years, we weren't able to fill both positions, so there wasn't always funding for both positions. Dr. Torreson got some funding for a food animal oriented resident, and she's finishing next year. But now we have 4 instead of 6. The more recent one is she just got hired, and usually we accepted in July, but the person who was offered the job said they had to come. Second candidate, there were problems with the visa, so we're delayed on this one, but we just hired her and she's starting next week. So we do have 1 starting now, and we're budgeting for 1 next year, and we're trying to look at the residency program again to see if we can bring it back to 22, which is a lot better for, the process, the way the process.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to add, Dr. Rovira, that we've put forth a short of situation nomination for the lab. How many years in a row now? And I know that one of the residents we were talking about was funding through the DMRP program, so I'll reach out to you if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Have us put together a nomination against due in October. I'll email you.
Thank you for your update. Do we have Jayne Griffith with the Department of Health available for her update?
Hello, I am here.
Great, go ahead.
Okay, I think someone was going to share the slides on your end if that's possible, or if not, it'll just take me a moment to pull them up.
We're getting it ready for you.
Thank you. Okay, would you like me just to get started?
Yeah, please.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invite to speak to you today about the monkeypox outbreak. Next slide, please. So as you likely know, monkeypox is a zoonotic infection. It's caused by the monkeypox virus. It's a double-stranded DNA virus in the orthopox virus genus. It's a cousin to smallpox, but it's less contagious and less severe than smallpox. It was discovered in a colony of research monkeys in 1958 in Denmark. And there are two clades, the Congo Basin clade, which causes most severe disease, and the West African clade, which results in a more mild disease. The West African clade is the clade that is driving the outbreak in this year. Next slide, please. So the first human case was identified in 1970 in a 9-month-old in Zaire, who was thought to have smallpox. And since then, the number of cases and outbreaks have been increasing, likely due to waning smallpox vaccine immunity. The last smallpox case occurred in the world in 1977, and smallpox vaccine was winding down right around early 1970s. It's currently endemic in 10 countries in rural tropical rainforested areas of West and Central Africa. Again, as I mentioned, it's primarily a zoonotic disease. The household cases typically occur after an index case has been infected by animal contact. And there have been studies looking at virus, and the virus has been found in Gambian pouched rats, dormice, rope squirrels, tree squirrels, and non-human primates. The rope squirrels and tree squirrels tend to be a primary source of food in these areas. Hunting, butchering are risk factors. And then people living in these forested areas may continually have indirect or low-level exposure to infected animals. Next, please. So prior to 2022, there have been very few cases of monkeypox identified in Europe and the US. And those few cases have largely been in returning travelers that have been infected in endemic countries. However, there was an outbreak in 2003 in the United States, resulting in 47 human cases. This occurred when their pet prairie dogs were likely infected with monkeypox when housed next to monkeypox-infected Gambian pouch rats that were imported from Africa. Next slide, please. So there has been an ongoing outbreak in Nigeria since 2017. And so it wasn't too surprising when on May 7th of this year, there was a monkeypox case identified in London in a traveler from Nigeria. However, within a week, there were 4 more cases that were identified. All were occurring in men who had sex with men, and none of these cases were connected to the initial case or had travel history. So this became very concerning very quickly. And about 10 days later, on May 18th, the first case in the US was announced, and that was a resident in Massachusetts. Next slide, please. So as of September 19th, there are 62,406 cases globally, and 99% of those cases reside in locations that have not historically reported monkeypox. Next, please. And in the US, as of September 19th, there are 23,893 cases. The majority of those cases are in New York, California, Texas, Florida, Georgia. And there has been 1 death reported, and that was in a person who resides in California. Next, please. So in early April, there was an MMWR published looking at the case characteristics of the monkeypox cases in the US. So from mid-May through the end of July, there was a total of 2,891 monkeypox cases in the US. Case report forms were received for 1,195 of those cases, or 41%. And of those, the median age was 35 years. 99% of these cases were men. And of 358 men with information on sexual behaviors, 337 or 94% reported sex or close intimate contact with a man or men during the 3 weeks before symptom onset. Next, please. And then looking at Minnesota as of September 19th, we have 171 cases. The majority are male. The majority live in the 7-county metro area. The median age is 34 years with the age range of 20 to 67 years. We've had 7 hospitalizations and no deaths. And again, our cases mirror the national case characteristics, again, with the majority of our cases and the US cases occurring among men who report having sex with men. And if you look at the figure to the right, this is our epi curve. So our first case was identified on June 25th. And then the peak of cases is roughly like, it was about August 8th, August 10th. And we are starting to see, a decline in cases. However, we are starting to think that we're plateauing. Next slide, please. So the big question that we keep getting is, how contagious is monkeypox? And it's not probably as contagious as this cartoon, and it's definitely not as contagious as COVID. Next slide. So monkeypox is a disease that is transmitted person to person, but it's primarily transmitted via prolonged contact with lesions or body fluids. And by prolonged contact, we're really referring to skin-to-skin contact. Respiratory droplet transmission can occur, but it typically requires really long face-to-face contact. So for example, like 3 hours or more. Fomite or environmental transmission is less common. However, scabs and lesion material do contain virus, and it is not clear yet if it can be transmitted through sexual transmission. The incubation period ranges from about 3 to 17 days. Most cases have symptom onset about a week after exposure. And unlike COVID, the infectivity clock starts at symptom onset and ends when pox scabs fall off and new skin develops. And that typically has been taking about 2 to 4 weeks. This infectivity period may be decreased if the case has been treated with an antiviral tecovirimat. Next, please. So in terms of severity, most cases are mild, but mild does not mean that it's an easy course. It's very inconvenient for people to have to be quarantined or isolated, for up to a month or so. Some of these cases report pretty severe pain, particularly those that have anal lesions. Some report severe lymphadenopathy, which if it's in the groin or abdominal area, is restricting them from, walking or even sitting. There have been ocular complications reported and secondary bacterial infections. And those at risk for severe disease include persons with immunosuppressive conditions, pregnant women, and children. Next, please. So what we're seeing is that symptoms in this outbreak are really different than the classic monkeypox symptoms that have been reported. So the classic symptoms basically resemble smallpox. The illness starts with prodromal symptoms, with the fever being most common, followed by lymphadenopathy, and then followed by the rash onset, with the rash developing in the same stages, being macular, papular, vesicular, pustular, then crusting. And then there are typically multiple lesions in many body areas. In this outbreak, the cases may or may not have the prodrome, or they may get the prodromal symptoms after the start of rash. The rash may develop in different stages, or skip a stage, or develop over a course of several days. The cases may have the rash only in one area, for example, their anal genital region or face or eye area. They may have one or only a few lesions, and the rash may be mistaken for a syphilis, herpes, or varicella rash. Next, please. So this collage here just represents pictures from the past, which is the photo on the left-hand side under classic lesions. And this depicts, what has typically been seen with, cases in the African countries. So a lot of lesions, very circumscribed, very, vesicular, pustular in appearance. The next set of photos are all from this current outbreak, and if you can discern the images, they might be really hard to see, but the photos kind of in the middle column are look almost benign. Sometimes we hear that these lesions are described as like a pimple or an acne lesion or a bug bite, and the next set of photos on the far right show, some of the more, umbilicated and circumscribed lesions. But again, these cases just, have a couple of lesions, unlike the hundreds or sometimes thousands that have typically been seen. Next, please. So we are encouraging, testing in any person that has a new unexplained acute rash or someone that has epidemiologic risk factors. So someone who may have symptoms, but said that they had contact with someone with a rash or monkeypox, or is in a social network that has monkeypox activity, or they have traveled to a country with confirmed cases of monkeypox, or where monkeypox is endemic, or they've had contact with a dead or live wild animal or an exotic pet that's an African endemic species, or used, any product that was derived from such an animal. Next, please. So treatment for monkeypox, as I mentioned, there's an antiviral tecovirimat or TPOXX that was developed for smallpox treatment, but it is available through the CDC under an investigational new drug protocol. And it is considered for monkeypox patients with severe disease or severe pain, ocular lesions, severe lymphadenopathy, or those who might be at high risk of disease. And then there's also cidofovir available for persons with severe illness. And then vaccinia immunoglobulin is available through the CDC, also for severe cases. Next, please. So there are two vaccines that are licensed by the FDA for preventing monkeypox. One is the ACAM 2000. That's a smallpox vaccine. We are not using that in Minnesota. The vaccine we are using is called the Jynneos vaccine, and that is preferred over the ACAM 2000 due to less severe adverse events, and it can be used in people that have contraindications to the ACAM 2000. The Jynneos virus uses a live non-replicating virus, and it's given on 2 doses, 28 days apart. And the immune response occurs about 2 weeks following the second dose and has very minimal side effects reported. Next, please. So there has been a very high demand for vaccine, but a very low supply. So there are some strategies in place to try to ensure that the persons that are at highest risk have access to vaccine. And that first strategy is the post-exposure prophylaxis, or PEP strategy. And that is the vaccine is offered to people who are known to be exposed to cases. So for example, like household members of a case or a partner or something like that. And the vaccine, when given within 4 days from the first date of exposure, has a good chance of preventing illness. If it's given between 4 and 14 days after the first date of exposure, it may reduce symptoms but may not prevent disease. The second strategy is the expanded post-exposure prophylaxis strategy, or the PEP++. And that's for people at high risk who have a high potential for exposure to a case. So that would be people who have a recent HIV diagnosis, or people who have been reporting, multiple sex partners within the past month. And then lastly, there is pre-exposure prophylaxis for occupational exposures, and that's offered to laboratorians who are performing research or diagnostic testing for orthopox viruses. And the question arises, well, what about healthcare workers, who are seeing these patients? Because PPE is in good supply right now. As long as a healthcare provider is wearing appropriate PPE, they would be considered not at risk. However, if we identify healthcare workers that did have an unprotected contact with a monkeypox patient and were deemed at risk, they would be eligible to be offered vaccine under that post-exposure prophylaxis strategy. Next, please. And just a quick word about monkeypox in pets. Next. So you may have heard some media buzz last month, or seen the article in the Lancet that was reporting on evidence of human to dog transmission of monkeypox virus. Next, please. This was a case in a 4-year-old male Italian Greyhound living in Paris, previously healthy. The dog had 2 owners who were both infected with monkeypox, and the dog presented with abdominal pustules and anal ulceration about 12 days after the owner's symptom onset. And the photos on the right depict, the far left photo is the abdominal pustules, and then the right photo is the anal ulceration. And the monkeypox virus DNA was sequenced from the dog and one of the owners, and it was compared by next-gen sequencing, and they were identical. Both owners co-slept with the dog, and this case was the first time monkeypox was reported in a domestic animal. Next, please. So consequently, CDC developed guidance for cases that have pets in the home. And the link is below, but can be found just going into the monkeypox page and inputting the search term pets in the home. So what we have been doing for our cases is when they're interviewed, we ask them if they have any pets. And if they do, we talk to them about preventive steps to avoid caring for their pet if possible, and to have another family member, household member care for the pet until they're no longer infectious. If that is not possible, we tell the case that they should wear gloves and a mask around their pet. And they should not allow their pet to sleep in their bed or have contact with their bedding or clothing or bandages. They shouldn't share food and just avoid, close contact or cuddling or snuggling with their pet. Next, please. So in summary, monkeypox can affect anyone who has prolonged skin-to-skin contact with an infected person. At this point in this outbreak, the overwhelming majority of cases are in men who have been exposed through sexual contact with other men. And early indications, both nationally and here in Minnesota, are that the peak of the outbreak has occurred. However, we anticipate that we will continue to see cases for the foreseeable future. And next slide. I always look forward to talks to like veterinarians or your audience, so I can show pictures of my dogs. This is just two of my dogs, Slim and Josie, and happy to take any questions if you have any.
Hi, Jane. This is Courtney Mueller. Quick question. Of the cases in Minnesota, were any of those persons previously vaccinated against smallpox?
That's a great question. So among our cases, we have not had any that reported smallpox vaccination. However, nationally, there have been a number of cases that reported smallpox vaccination.
Are there any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Jane, for your update.
Yep, thank you so much.
Right, Shauna and Erik, we're ready for you.
Okay, I go because I know I'm gonna need to have supply. Absolutely. I think you feel comfortable too.
Okay, we're just gonna give a little update on the high path avian influenza outbreak as it is right now. As you very well know, it started in the spring, kind of had a lull through the summer, and now we're seeing cases again. There we go. So I'll talk a little bit about the incident command structure that we follow. This would be with any incident that we have, any foreign animal disease that we would encounter. This is all emergency responders basically follow this basic plan as well. So, it's hard to see all of the different names and positions on there, but this is what we've put together for our avian response or the high path influenza response as far as local responders go. So this is kind of our bare bones response as the board has it. We also have the memorandum of understanding with the Department of Ag. So there are some Department of Agriculture people on this org chart, as well as some USDA people. So as you're probably aware, Greg Suskovic retired from the board here this summer, right about the time I was coming on. I've been here since the end of May. So I was able to get some of the experience that he had. So I've basically taken over his role as the incident commander at the board level. We also have Stefan Schaefbauer from USDA as an incident commander, and then Lucy Hunt from the Department of Ag. So we're kind of co-incident commanders, if you would. And then it just follows down the branch pattern of all the different needs that we have to do. And there's a lot of different things that go on in each of these positions. And currently, we are ramping this up. We're adding more people to it. We have a national incident command team coming in, if you would. They have several teams around the country that can respond when we ask. So we put in the ask for basically a half a team. They will be coming in next Wednesday to start. So that will help relieve, or at least have some depth to this, starting next week. That, and then we'll move into the actual, what we're seeing.
So I just wanted to remind you guys what we dealt with this spring, because I know we gave an update at our last board meeting, but that was, I think, in April. And a lot happened after that. And so, you know, our incident began this spring on March 25th. We had a total of 81 affected premises in 28 counties in this map. You can kind of see where they were scattered. It was pretty much all over the state that we saw cases. So just because of our demographics in Minnesota, they were primarily in turkeys. We had 52 commercial meat type turkey premises affected, 5 breeder turkey, 1 table egg layer, that's chickens, 1 commercial broiler operation, and 21 backyard operations, or kind of small flock owners. And then 1 of those is considered an epi-link, so it was depopulated just because of the close proximity with workers on that farm. We were targeted to have a disease freedom date on November 5th. And because of round 2, that is no longer the case anymore. And so we, as you guys are all aware, we had our first case detected at the end of August, and that was certainly a lot earlier than we had anticipated. We did expect that we were going to see some cases this fall just because of the number of cases that were reported in our wild bird populations and how that continued, you know, through the spring and even into the summer. We were fully expecting that we might see a resurgence. But it did come a little bit earlier than we had all anticipated. We were ready to respond, and so we were still able to act quickly. As of 6 o'clock this morning, there was 21 confirmed cases in 9 counties. We do have an additional 5 cases that have been reported as presumptive positive, so they're positive at the null lab. They're just not confirmed through MBSL yet. And that added 2 more counties, one of which is in Roseau, Minnesota, so one of those dots way up on the top of the map there. So again, mostly in our commercial turkeys, we've had 7 meat type turkeys, 2 breeder turkeys, and then 3 backyard, and that's considered the OIE, or World Animal Health Organization, as non-poultry. So it doesn't have the same trade implications as our commercial operations, and we do different types of surveillance activities around each of those farms. This map I know is messy and really confusing, but it has in here all of the blue stars. Those are all of our cases from the spring, okay? If they've got control zones or circles around them, those are our new cases. So you can kind of see where our new cases are overlapped on top of our spring cases. Dean, you look like you're about ready to ask a question. Nope. These next couple slides are slides that I got from Dr. Donahue with USDA. She's our epidemiologist, and so she puts together these epi curves. So you can kind of see what happened this spring. The blue is our turkeys. The yellows are our OIE non-poultry, so our backyard flocks. And then we've got a couple chickens sucking in there. They came on the same day, actually. And so we had our lull through the summer, and then August 28th was when they had our first case this fall. Just a little heat map to kind of show where most cases are being found, and you can kind of see that on the previous maps that we've had, but this helps to just kind of narrow it down. Certainly west central Minnesota is hit the hardest, but that is also where the most poultry is grown in our state. I think this graph is a really interesting one because it overlays what we're seeing this year in 2022 on top of our 2015 cases. Okay, so that this yellow line here is our IPATH 2015 cases. The orange here is our cumulative cases for 2022, and this is just our daily count of 2022. I think we all walked out of the spring thinking that we were probably doing better than we did in 2015. We had less cases. We were able to respond more quickly. I don't have a lot of faith that we're not going to surpass that number if the trend continues as is going this fall. Just some national data, we're not alone in this, and this information is on our website and is being updated as USDA updates their information. But we've got 39 states that have had at least a case of high path, and so there's very few that have been unaffected so far. So I don't need to dive into that, but everybody is getting hit by this pretty hard this year.
Shauna, just a quick question.
Yep.
With 39 affected states, I didn't remember that we had that many in the spring. There must be some states that are brand new on this fall.
Yeah, it's continued to spread, and I feel like our west coast, like Oregon and California, I don't know when Utah, maybe Steve knows that, when they joined the party.
Utah had 1 or 2 cases like in April, and then their turkey operations were. So you're right. Spreading west.
Yes. These next couple slides are also information that I got from Dr. Donahue, and so she is going out as part of the epidemiologist and talking to the producers, and so she's got a little bit more clinical picture than what I get usually when I get that first phone call. And so this is just that clinical presentation that we see. So obviously, sudden increasing mortality, it's usually the first sign, and that's when we get the phone call that there's just a spike that's unusual that they can't explain. The birds are depressed or quiet. She's reporting that the birds feel hot. Some growers initially think that it's some other production disease that they're dealing with, whether it's coli or coccidia or dermatitis that kind of fools them for a day or two into thinking that they're maybe treating something else or need to be treating something else. And then the decreased water consumption was something that was reported this spring, but she had some interesting kind of timeline for when that is. So she says the day before we start seeing those clinical signs, which is the mortality, you'll get a 2 to 3% decrease in your water consumption. And then that certainly decreases even further once those clinical signs show up and the mortality spikes. If growers are doing necropsies on the birds, they're seeing enlarged spleen or speckled spleens, that's pretty commonly being reported. And Mary noted that their crops are full, so there doesn't seem to be a decrease in feed consumption like we see with the water. I asked Mary to put together some kind of risk factors or potential epilinks. This is just information that she's getting from the growers when she talks to them. And so some of this hasn't been proven. A lot of it's kind of anecdotal at this point, but I think it's kind of that common trend that she sees. And I know Mary's always very good about asking, how do you think it got into your flock? Okay, so she tries to kind of pull that out of the growers when she talks to them. Certainly wild bird proximity to the premises is a pretty common risk factor. So if you're seeing a lot of geese or waterfowl kind of hanging around nearby, that seems to be a common trend. Certainly being within that infected zone, which is that 0 to 3 kilometer zone around becoming infected later on. A lot of growers are reporting that there's market fly infestations and also beetles. And so there's a question about what role insects are playing with potential spread of this disease. And then a lot of growers are also reporting that recent crop harvest activity that's maybe attracting some wild birds to the nearby fields might be a pretty significant risk factor. And I've heard this now a couple of times, not just from Mary, but from some of the vets too. They're concerned or wondering about what role rodents are playing with that. And so some of these farms have had some significant rodent pressure or increased activity around the farm right prior to them breaking. And then certainly recent activity with vaccination crews or excavation activity close to the barn seems to potentially be a risk factor for these commercial operations. So again, I think these are things that need to be looked into further. They're not definite causes at this point. And then the risk factors for small flocks seems to be significantly different than our backyards. Certainly free access to outdoor areas or ponds seems to be playing a pretty big role. So a lot of our small flock owners are reporting that, you know, we've got a pond right down there. And then those, there might be some wild migratory birds that visit those areas. Feeding the birds on the ground instead of in some sort of an additional feeder seems to be a risk factor. And then mixed flocks, so chickens and ducks and geese all kind of living together. That is a risk factor for how often we're seeing in these small flocks. The good thing is that there doesn't seem to be any direct or indirect links from our backyard producers over to our commercial. So we don't think that that's contributing to transmission at all. Just a couple other things that the board has done as part of this event. Michael, give Michael some credit for this, for working with Minute to develop a new mapping tool, and this is on our website where people can enter an address and determine how close they are to an infected farm. And so it doesn't narrow down, it doesn't tell you where that infected farm is, but it will let you know if you're in an established control area. And so that kind of puts the tool into the people's hands to be able to better understand their risks. And so we've had some pretty good compliments on this map, even though it's only been out for a couple of weeks maybe. One of the complaints that we had, not only from the lab side, but also from our response team, was the difficulty that some producers have with getting the right information on a submission form. And so I worked with the University of Minnesota Extension to help put together a very short video on how to fill out a submission form. And so this was actually just recorded last week, and it became available yesterday, I think. And so we're going to be working on getting this video out to the turkey growers and the chicken and egg associations to help get those out into the people in the field who are collecting that information, to try to cut down on some of the mistakes that were made when those samples come into the lab. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention was just some additional outreach activities that we've done. Put on another small flock webinar last week, similar to what we did in the spring. We had 2 of those that we did for the spring, primarily geared again towards kind of that backyard producer. Participation was significantly lower this time than it was. And so whether that's just the word not getting out about the event or kind of fatigue about hearing about bird flu, it's kind of, you know, the thing from the spring. But I think it was reported, and so it's still a tool for people who want to learn more to have that available. You may remember that this spring we did put a ban on our poultry events. So all of the fairs and community sales, we put a halt on that until we knew that our cases were down. And so I think that ban was in place from April 1st through the end of June. And we have made the decision at this time to not ban those, kind of fully recognizing that this might be a long-term thing that we have to deal with, and we need to figure out how to do it safely and kind of help manage that risk. And so I am again working with University Extension, try to develop some additional materials to be able to get to those event managers and participants and any veterinarians to better recognize clinical signs, biosecurity measures, and other mitigation things that can help prevent any problems tied to those events. That's what I had for my update. If you guys have questions.
I have a question. So, given the fact that you've established there's not a direct correlation between your backyard and commercial flocks, what do you and Dr. Donahue think is accounting for the increase in the number of infected backyard flocks now versus in the spring?
So you're saying we have more infected flocks
Backyard.
right now than we did in the spring?
Yes.
If that's true.
Is that true?
I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
You know, we certainly had more backyard flocks in 2022 than we did in 2015. 2015, we only had 1 backyard flock. And I think that can be contributed to just, it's in the wild birds and it's in the wild birds everywhere. And I know Erik Hildebrand from the DNR is coming up here, and I'm hoping he's going to give an update on what they're seeing there. But I think just having that increased viral pressure makes those backyard flocks a little bit more susceptible.
And it's a little bit more adapted to chickens than 15, is that right?
That's the general understanding that by the time this virus hit US soil, it was already very poultry adapted. And so I think that contributes to that incubation period being what seems to be pretty short, right? By the time you pick it up in the birds, they're dying. We're not even, I don't even think we've been as successful in testing early enough to pick it up. Usually the testing coincides with when we're starting to see. And I think that contributes to it being a more just a poultry adapted virus.
Do ducks tend to be as fragile, if that's the right term, as like say turkeys, something, or can they better deal with something like this? 'Cause just trying to think about, it seems like it keeps kind of smoldering out there. It's gotta be smoldering in something. And is it harder on ducks than it would be on turkeys and chickens? And it's like it's quite as hard on, well, infected maybe, chickens as it is turkeys, but just any comments on that?
Yeah, I don't think anything's as fragile as a turkey. They seem to be very susceptible to a lot of different things. We are seeing mortality in both our domestic waterfowl, our ducks and geese, as well as in the wild waterfowl. But I don't think they're as susceptible to the signs of it, to the mortality, as much, though I think they're a little bit better about hiding it, at least for a while, and maybe kind of maintaining it within their bodies, as compared to chickens and turkeys. Dr. Lauer.
Great, thanks for an excellent update. I think you guys have a really hot virus that you're working with, and it's really a tough deal. I would commend you on your mapping tool. That thing that you developed, Michael, is really great. I think that's a good thing. Could you comment on your fall depopulation, how that's going, as well as the permitted movement? Do you have any comments? Is it going better in the fall? Than in the
Fortunately,
spring?
we've got two very experienced people who are not me to talk about those two events. So Myah, can you address the depopulation?
Yeah, it's been going smoothly, as smoothly as it can go this fall. I can't compare that to spring since I was on the other side of it in the spring, but it's been, ever had to.
So in the spring, it seemed to be a very industry-driven depopulation. Is that the same as it is in the fall?
We are seeing that mainly because of the sites that are popping positive are typically industry.
One particular company
There you
has
go.
their own
Capabilities.
Yes,
capabilities and equipment to do so. And so if it's one of their farms, they will take care of the depopulation.
There you
So
go.
at least at this point,
Yep.
that's been the same as it was this spring.
I could say too, also, this fall compared to the spring, we already have our finances in line, and the relationships built for, and our equipment has been maintained now. So, we don't have the same sourcing issues that we were experiencing in the spring, and we don't have broken stuff anymore because we fixed it. So that makes a big difference in making sure that our response is more timely.
Veronica, do you want to comment on how permitting is going? I know you're new to this.
Yeah, so again, I don't have experience from the spring, but it's going very smoothly. We're a small team, but we really are on top of it. And, you know, we get probably 2 to 3 movement requests or permit requests every couple of days. So it's slow right now, but it seems like the industry is really using and understanding the gateway as well. And I know in the spring that there was.
We didn't have to reestablish any of their gateway accounts, so if they were already signed up this spring, they were already set to go with it. And having spent 3 months going through that process, the one thing in permitting that we did change is we dropped the requirement for permitting on feed. It seemed like it was an extra burden, and I wasn't convinced that anybody was actually using the data that we collected. So recognizing that it's a low risk, we decided that we should focus our permitting activities on higher risk movements.
I have a couple questions. Kara mentioned rotating equipment, that is maintained. You know, being a farmer, we regularly maintain our equipment, you know, we're using it spring and fall, and so we have to schedule equipment. Is there a plan moving forward to keep that equipment maintained? Previously, it had been 7 years. We had an outbreak where we had to use that. Is there a plan in place for that?
That equipment is owned by the Department of Agriculture, but we certainly have a great relationship with the emergency management team there. And so there is discussion to make a plan going forward to maintain equipment.
Okay. My next question is, vaccines. I know that was talked about in 2015. Is the situation different with the vaccine topic now because Europe has really kind of had the same struggle as we have here? Does that change the vaccine topic at all? Because back in 2015, it was such a political kind of issue. What do you guys hear, I guess?
I might reach to Steve to back me up on this, but I don't. You know, so just so the board members know, when a country uses a vaccine to try to control, you know, an influenza virus that's an H5 or an H7 or high path, it shuts down trade. And so, because you just kind of assume that we're all living with it and we're not able to eradicate it. And so that's why the US has never been very interested in pursuing that. I don't know where the conversations are going with the USDA. I think that the topic is being discussed. But even if they decide to pursue it, I think there's a lot of things and factors that go into making that decision. I have some concerns about what the vaccine would do as far as being able to detect cases. Does it hide the clinical signs, but it not necessarily reduce spread? So it might prevent the turkeys from dying, but then it's harder to pick up. Sure. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that's just a concern that I have. I hope USDA as the country and all of our trading partners start having those conversations to better understand how we live with this, because I do think this is a virus we're going to be living with. I don't know if you've had any.
No, I haven't heard any of those discussions, but I agree with you, and I think you're right on. That is the challenge with any of the foreign animal disease vaccines, right? So whether it's influenza or FMD, is that until that last animal that was vaccinated is gone, trade status is by the country. So there's that part. And then as you said, and that was one of the challenges like with Castle disease with vaccine, is that it maybe masks it. So it's not a silver bullet.
So Michelle Crom had mentioned something at their meeting in Georgia that one of the big layer companies had sort of said they were open for, I don't know if it was even discussion of vaccine or saying the word or something, which she thought was pretty big move forward. And I don't know if layer industry is really driving the vaccine, you know, through the country. You guys know the politics of everything.
I can kind of comment to that because I was part of those discussions in a previous position, but the big question is that, will the industry support it or not? And there were segments of the industry which were not supporting it previously, which now believe there may be a role, but what is that role? Is it commercial turkeys? Yeah, probably not. We're probably looking at those really highly valuable genetic animals. Sure. Is probably what is being considered and discussed. And it's a long way from saying yay. But previously it was not even discussed. So that's the very minor little baby step that has occurred.
Thank you.
And how much indemnity can USDA pay out right before they start saying we've got to have the discussion? Right. I don't know where that is. Yeah.
Mary Donahue, you guys are.
Yeah, so I had a discussion with Avian staff earlier this summer before this outbreak started because, you know, I would hear from producers, I listened to everything they've got to say, and they had said, you know, well, what about the vaccine? And I explained what Shauna Voss has said. I think we need to, what is our goal with using vaccine, one? But what Fidel referenced was a study, and I could dig it up, but it's previously been looked at, this is a different virus from 2015. It's probably a different virus from that study, but you're able to declare freedom faster by a stamping out policy versus vaccination. And I think that's what everybody wants. But it's, I think it will come up more than once, but I think that somebody needs to look at that. Where do we get disease freedom faster? Because that's kind of what drives some of our exports, which support our prices. Over.
Thank you very right. Thank you for that. Okay, I have one last question. Because we had it in the spring and now we're seeing it again this fall, I know there are growers out there that are worried that they're going to get hit again in the fall. Is there any kind of support that we're offering for growers? I mean, just when we talk about mental health and anxiety, of this virus.
That's a good question. I know the Department of Ag has a lot of good resources that we can reach out to. I haven't heard further discussion on what role the board can help play with that, but
That's one of the things that's been promoted in the stakeholder calls is we talked about the specific individuals they can reach out to for support, and then also the crisis lines. But yeah, that's something we can continue pushing.
Is Joey also pushing that, doing some of the contact tracing?
I don't.
I think I would just say, at least on the board level in the field, I think we've been provided those information packets and what their contacts that we do provide, or when we're talking with producers, whether it's with high-path, regular producers, you try to make them aware of those resources.
That's after they've been infected though, right?
Well, again, whether it's high-path or anything else that, obviously in that situation, yes, the case managers that might be working with them, but just, even before that happens, or just in general discussion when we're out working with producers and markets and whatnot. Sure. Make them.
And there have been producers that are on a second round, right?
What would you envision, Erica, for support? What are you kind of thinking? Maybe flesh that out a little bit?
Well, I'm not really sure. I've had a few growers say to me, if they get it again this fall, they're done. They will be out of business.
Gotcha.
And
you mean infected again, not just
infected.
not just impacted by control.
Correct. If they become infected again this fall for a second round this year, they'll be done. And that, for me as a farmer, that's hard to follow. I'm 6th generation on my farm. And so I just think, if I was in that position, knowing that I may lose my family farm, that's a lot of stress. And so I just think that is part of, it's part of this process. So I don't necessarily have specifics. I just know that there has to be some sort of help offered, and not just after that farmer would become infected a second time. What can we do, I guess? And maybe this isn't necessarily our responsibility, but industry-wide, what can we do for our farmers going into the fall? It's something that needs to be, I guess, in the back of everybody's mind. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks. I hadn't thought
so
of that.
that's not super helpful, but we can talk later. We can keep in conversation.
And I'm pretty sure there are some of those resources, like was said, the Department of Ag has those resources that are available to anybody at any time, so you don't have to wait until you've been infected.
Right.
So, and I'm pretty sure they've got 1 or 2 individuals that are basically on call 24/7. They hand out their personal phone numbers, so that can be called at any time.
Thank you.
Has there been filtration in the pig business? If you use filtration, especially in some high value type situations, you may be breeding flocks of turkeys or chickens or whatever. Has there been a look at that, or is this a particle size that is so small that even filters its can get through, or do we know that? I guess, kind of where are we at that way?
I'm gonna throw it out to Marion if she wants to answer the question, otherwise I'll tackle it.
I'll let you tackle it because I probably have opinions, which are not very.
I think it's something that is being looked at. I know a lot of the, especially I think on the commercial turkey side, they're attempting to use landscape fabric to cover vents as a way to at least try to eliminate dust from coming in. So if the virus is traveling on dust, you know, how much of that can we stop before it gets into the farm? I don't know success rate on that.
Yeah, so those landscape fabrics, most of the turkey industry does use those. And, you know, spraying it down with disinfectant to try to help as well. I think part of the frustration and maybe why the industry really wants this case control study to expand out to turkeys is how many actions do we want to take without fully understanding how it got in the barn? And so do we invest in that when in fact it's the rodents? And so I think that's partly why the turkey industry pushed really hard to be included in that case control so that they could be pointed in the direction of what should I do? Is that kind of what you're getting from them as well?
Yeah, and I think, and Mary can back me up on this one too, but I know at least in Minnesota, we had at least one, it was a stud farm. So a breeder Tom operation that I think had the whole HEPA filters system. And I don't know if your operations in South Dakota had something
Mine do not.
similar. And that farm still got infected. So
Exactly.
there's a lot we don't know yet.
Yeah, Shauna, I'm back. They had every filter you could imagine, and I kept the rodent boxes, and I will do that when I go out the farm. I pick up your rodent boxes, I look under them, I shake them, I look in them, and yeah, they had spray foam for all the cracks in the barns. Very, very high biosecurity. So it's really frustrating.
Any other questions or comments?
And along that line, I was just to comment on all of the, I'm pretty sure all of the positive samples are getting DNA fingerprinted. So they can kind of map to see where they're moving, how they're moving. And if I'm not mistaken, I think early on in the spring, they were saying it's about 85%. They figured were new infections coming from outside in instead of moving barn to barn. So the industry has figured out how to keep it from moving from farm to farm with people and equipment for the most part. But there's still a lot of research there, but they're looking at that pretty closely, how it's moving, how it's changing.
Fair question, quick. Did some of the new cases, did any of them tie to the state fair, any of that stuff? Okay, I don't know if it's backyard flocks or.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any, Mary can correct me, but I haven't heard of any backyard flocks that were also at the state fair, because you're correct, that first case was detected right at the end, the tail end. I think fortunately, there was only 1 or 2 days left on poultry exhibitions before they all went home and then the rabbits came in. And so the timing was probably the best that we could have asked for if we were gonna have a case detected during the state fair, which was kind of everyone's nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of the backyard flocks, there's 4 since this round 2, episode 2, none of them were exhibiting at the state fair. One person had been to fairs, but it was on the far end of the incubation period, but they did not walk through any of the poultry barns. Over.
Any other questions or comments? Great. Thank you both of you for your update. Kara, you're up for the bylaw. There we go.
All right, I don't have much of a presentation. The board bylaws were, a brainchild of Annie Belgady, who, has since left the board. She did, do a very brief presentation on these in April. And instead of focusing a lot of time, because it was a very chaotic meeting last April, she kind of sent, I believe she sent them with you, and we've sent them out since to review. But I will quick go over these. Let me just. Share the screen. Oh, no, I have not. Thank you. All right, so just going through, these are our draft bylaws that we presented. They are fairly just typical bylaws of how any board operates. So it talks about the board's mission, the description about what the agency does. And then we go down into explaining the statutes and rules, linking to those, our data practices, who our membership is. Sorry, I'm going a little fast, sorry. We also then have outlined here our board meetings and procedures, so explaining, you know, that we operate with Robert's Rules of Order, how often we meet, when the elections are, and the general timeline for that. Who the administration is, so, you know, noting that the state veterinarian is the executive director, and is in charge of just hiring and making sure that we've got the support staff to empower the board to do the things that they need to do so that they're not running the agency, right? The duties of the officer and the vice chair, just what board members are expected to do. So, you know, attending meetings, participating, demonstrating knowledge, and being prepared for meetings. Information about, for new members and, you know, disciplinary conduct. We have our code of ethics. So I believe that this may be part of your oath to be a board member. But this is very similar to what is expected of employees as well, state employees. So making sure that, you know, you're representing in an unconflicted way, and that you are representing the interest of Minnesotans. Legal counsel, so this just outlines that the legal counsel for the board is the Attorney General's office. And so then adoption of the bylaws and amendments. So this is, you know, once you move to adopt, if you would like to do that today, this just states that they go into effect with a 2/3 majority, and amendments can be adopted to these bylaws with a 2/3 majority as well. So these are, and then it also just outlines per diem and reimbursement, which is also similar to that for state employees. So did any of you have questions about the bylaws that Annie drafted up?
I just comment I would have is there's a part in there about being to farm inspection or something once or twice, I think a year, which I think is good to, especially for the board people, to be able to get out and see some of those types of things that I've never been on one of those myself, but I think that is good to have that expectation.
Was that under the conduct or code of ethics or?
Duties.
Thank you.
I think all that kind of stuff helps with interacting with the staff and getting to know what the expectations are, what they do. I think that's things like that. And of course, coming out of COVID here, and it's nice to have about everybody here at this meeting and get back in this in person, because I think we didn't do that until COVID. And to me, the meetings were opportunity to get to know people, interact with people, put some faces and names together, and and I
Absolutely.
think that's really important that we get back to that type of meeting. But I think this is something that, that expectation is good, because it's going to give those new board members in general a greater, deeper appreciation for what is actually being done out.
Absolutely.
So I think that's really good.
Are there other questions or comments on the bylaws?
This is Peggy.
Go ahead, Dr. Hawkins.
Okay. I have to admit that I have not taken this very seriously until recently and everything. So you were mentioning that, oh, if we want to approve it today, I see some inconsistencies. There's some small points that I think need to be improved before we would approve this draft. One of the main inconsistencies is that we say that we elect a president and vice president, and then call them chairs sometimes and presidents sometimes, and it's not really clear who exactly you're talking about. You can infer it, but it's not. There's some what I call Peggy perfect moves that we might need to do with this document.
Yeah, since it isn't clear that if those are interchangeable or different titles, absolutely. Yeah, if the board would prefer to send it back to the agency, we can certainly take that back with any suggestions rather than moving to adopt. And we can bring it back in December.
I mean, if it's not important that we get this done right away, I'd like to go over it myself and send in back to you some of my comments on the document itself.
Sure.
Okay.
Is there a timeline for review of the bylaws? Do they have to be reviewed annually, for example? Do we know the answer?
I did not
I
see
did see
that.
that was addressed in there.
Yeah, I did not see that in here. There is just that there can be amendments made with a 2/3 majority. So we could put in here either an annual, biannual review of the bylaws or something like that. Or whatever the board members would prefer. We can absolutely add something.
I think that would be important to include some sort of a review. Other boards that I've been involved with do that, whether it be annually or biannually. It's the other thing that I would like to point out is us board members. This was sent out on Monday of this week. And so I think, for us, if we're going to be reading through something and then potentially voting on it, we need maybe a week. I would suggest or recommend a week to have the materials to read through and really have time to vet out if we have questions or concerns prior to a meeting. Sure.
So along that lines, do we want to set a date by which the comments will be in to Kara?
I think that would be great. Give it a timeline to receive comments, just to keep the ball moving forward.
Sure.
So what would make sense for?
Yeah, what would make sense for board members?
Well, I'm home this week, so I'm probably gonna do this afternoon and be done with it, but that's not everybody's ability right now.
30 days.
Would October 1st be okay?
October 1st.
October 1st.
Okay, and then we can send it back out to board members for the next meeting with changes. Yeah, I think we would just need a motion then to table till,
Okay.
till the next meeting.
I make a motion, we table this until the next meeting in December and have our remarks in by the 1st of October.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second on the to table our bylaws until the December meeting and have a comment period open until October 1st. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Oh, by the way,
Yeah,
good
go ahead.
job. I mean, whoever did, this is a good document. Good job, you guys.
It was all Annie. It was, as she said goodbye to us, she passed the file off to me and went on her way.
Here, as long as you're up there, just as we go forward, there's gonna be openings or positions and, needing to find people that are going to apply. And, I think I've had a conversation with you about.
Board position vacancies
Yes.
rather than staff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe we have 2 terms ending at the end of this year. So and they're both producer seats. So I usually the Secretary of State's office updates vacancies postings usually around November for the seats that open up in January. So as soon as that information is out, I'll share with board members to share with anyone you know that could be a good applicant for those positions. And of course, we will also share through our avenues. But yeah, we have a couple of seats coming up.
Anything else for Kara? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like we're on time for lunch. Do we know is lunch ready?
We have a peek out there, but it should be.
Okay.
Yep.
So we'll break for lunch and return at 12:30.
Okay.
Again, hopefully everybody got something to eat. Now, but do we have Erik from the DNR ready to go?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear and see me?
We can.
All right, awesome. That's kind of a fun screen that you guys have going there with the conference room. I can see the whole room. That's neat. All right, I am going to share my screen. Gotta find it here. Let's see. I would like this one. All right, so I should be sharing. Just let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see it.
Yep.
All right, perfect. So yeah, thank you for letting me join the meeting today. Erik Hildebrand with the Wildlife Health Program for the Minnesota DNR, and thought I'd give an update on chronic wasting disease, and then just a little bit about EHD, and then also some HPAI updates. So mostly focused on a lot on the chronic wasting disease as we're entering a busy time for deer, as deer hunters just hit the field this past Saturday, actually, for archery season. So with that, CWD in 2022, here is a look. Oh, there we go. This is a look at where we have CWD in Minnesota currently. And this shows where we have CWD confirmed in captive cervid facilities and also in wild deer. And so far, as of right now, DNR has tested more than 106,000 wild deer since 2002, when we first started conducting CWD surveillance in the state. Most of these wild deer, however, are found primarily in the southeast corner of the state, where we have a persisting infection. We do have currently deer feeding and attractant bans throughout the state. And as you can see from the map, it affects much of the state. We put in place feeding and attractant bans where we have detected disease in wild deer. And this is at a county level. So this is affecting not just hunters, but also even wildlife viewers, wildlife watchers. And so most of those wildlife watchers that are not hunters, they can more readily associate where the county lines are versus using a deer permit area or DPA boundary. So that we use the county boundaries for these efforts. And then when we have a surveillance zone where we don't have disease necessarily found in the wild deer, but we have surveillance being conducted in the area, then we have just a deer feeding ban in place. So this fall, what does it look like? Well, we have surveillance occurring in 10 areas of the state. We have 5 management zones now, unfortunately, 1 control zone and 4 surveillance zones. So the management zones that you can see here in the kind of the darker orange color, that is where we've detected disease in the wild deer. And so those management zones have management activities associated with them. Some of those such as carcass movement restrictions. And down in the southeast corner of the state, where we have that persisting infection, we've also set up a control zone. And this is where we also include carcass movement restrictions. But if there is seen radial spread, we would like to catch that early. And so that's the idea of setting up that control zone of having samples being collected in those areas. New this year is our DPA 661 in the far northwest corner of the state near Climax, where a adult buck was found in November of last year during the hunting season. And sorry about that. And then we also have a new surveillance zone around that area, which is to be conducted to get a better sample set to get an idea of where did this disease come from. If we have a bigger infection in this area, we'd like to know. DNR has not been in this area conducting surveillance for over a decade in this area, so we don't have a good grip of what is happening in the wild deer with samples in that area. Then you move over to Grand Rapids, which is deer permit area 679. This was in February. An adult doe was found dead in a private landowner's backyard in the city limits of Grand Rapids. Following our response of sick deer, we collected that carcass, got it to the lab. It was confirmed to have CWD. We did conduct additional agency culling this past winter in that area and found an additional positive buck about a mile away, still within the city limits of Grand Rapids. So we set up a management zone in that area as well. All of these areas that you can see on the map, the surveillance areas, I should step back, sorry. The gray areas, which are surveillance zones, those are conducted usually in relation to a positive Cervid facility that's found positive or adjacent borders that would be found positive on the other side of Minnesota's border. So the surveillance zone up by Bemidji, northwest Minnesota, that was due to the Beltrami County positive facility that was found. And the west central deer permit areas 273, 213, that was set up because of a Douglas County positive Cervid facility. And then also to the eastern part of Minnesota, that was set up due to the Pine County positive facility. You'll notice that all of these areas have mandatory sampling that we're going to be requiring hunters over the opening weekend of firearm season, November 5th and 6th, except we are implementing a risk-based model approach in the surrounding surveillance zone of 661, sorry. And then we are also implementing the risk-based, point-based approach in that West Central, 273 and 213. Let's see. So what are the big changes this year? Well, we have more areas affected, unfortunately. When the disease was first found in the southeast after the Pine Island effort, it was found in 2016 with only the 603 Fillmore County area. Now we're up to 10 areas of the state. New this year is our self-service sampling stations, which you can see in this picture of the black barrel with the orange band around it and the map plywood. We are not offering those during the archery and muzzleloader seasons in the management and control zones. We do have other opportunities that hunters can use in these areas during this time. We will have these self-service sampling stations available during the entire firearm season in our management and control zones. And we also hired 90-day technicians, excuse me, 90-day technicians for each of the management zones. And this is really to help because those management zones, remember, have carcass movement restrictions that hunters have to follow. And so there will be an increased need for sampling opportunities to meet with hunters and help out with those efforts. The new CW sampling opportunities that I mentioned, we are now offering these statewide, which is new for DNR. And this is a hunter mail-in kit. Other states that we talked to have offered these in years past, mixed successes, but also we're not quite sure how fully or how strong these kits were kind of messaged or communicated through outreach efforts to hunters in those other states. And I'll get to these kits in a little bit here. The other opportunity for hunters to use this year is an expanded statewide partner sampling program, which is a network of mostly taxidermists. And again, I'll get to that slide here in a minute. And then I do have a note here. We held 2 public meetings earlier in the Climax and Grand Rapids area for the public to attend. And let's see. So I mentioned carcass movement restrictions. This is one way that we would like to mitigate potential spread of this disease and offer dumpsters to hunters to dispose of their carcass remains. So the high risk parts such as the head with brain, the spinal column, after they butcher their animal, they could utilize these dumpsters. And then we have DNR has contracts in place with local haulers that then go to approve landfills. So we have these dumpsters spread out throughout all management and control zones. They'll be serviced weekly by that vendor that was awarded the contract. And all these locations are available on our website. And if anything changes, I always point folks to the website because that's our one place that we can really get our most up-to-date information to the hands of the public. To note here, though, hunters that receive a confirmed not detected test result, they can move that whole carcass out of the zone. It's the folks that don't have a confirmed test result, they can only move the 4 quarters with the main leg bone or the meat out of the zone if they don't have a confirmed test result. We do have quartering stations, as you can see in the picture here in the bottom right, where we offer a tripod so a hunter can hang a deer by themselves. We offer up a bone saw, unscented garbage bags, some paper towels, a table, and these dumpsters are heavily used. I believe they are heavily appreciated also by our hunters. They generate a lot of waste. Just last year alone, it was close to 230 tons of deer waste that went to approved landfills. Another thing that we are conducting, we just got done with our first round of direct mailings of postcards to hunters. So any hunter that identified a DPA last year that was in that's our CWD zone this year, we grabbed their address from the ELS, electronic licensing system, and sent them these postcards. And this is a direct outreach method that we can notify them of new changes, such as the lack of self-service sampling stations during archery and muzzleloader seasons, and then also providing them those new opportunities and where they can find more information, reminding them about the carcass movement restrictions and feeding and attractant bans. We have about 120,000 postcards that'll be going out to hunters in our areas this year. The first mailing just went out first week of September to archery hunters. And then we have another mailing that's set to go out October 17th to the firearms and muzzleloader hunters. So the hunter mail-in kits, we built our wildlife health program. We built 5,000 of these kits. So far, as of yesterday, we had 1,000 of them that were signed up for on our website. And we have another 1,000 that went out to deer groups already and 500 that went out to area offices. So I'm hopeful that these kits are going to be intriguing. I hope they're going to be used, but we'll find out. This is a pilot project for DNR this year to see how it goes. I mentioned other states had implemented these, but also had mixed successes. But again, likely hinged on, did their hunters know about them? How much outreach was conducted? So some unknowns. Again, when it's a pilot, so once they're gone, they're gone. When hunters are successful, the hunter has to collect the sample themselves, the lymph nodes, and then we have a pre-printed UPS shipping label that is already provided. The hunter just has to bring it to the local UPS store, and then they'll be shipped back to our wildlife health program, where we will process them, complete the data, get it entered into the system, check that it truly is lymph tissue, and then get it shipped off to the lab. The expanded partner sampling program. I mentioned this is with the partners with taxidermists. In years past, we have implemented this. We've used taxidermists in our management zones, and since 2016, those ones have collected just shy of 6,000 samples. It has generated 11 positives. Again, these are typically those trophy animals, those mature bucks that are 3 times more likely to have the disease. So this year we went statewide, so including our management zone, but also the rest of the state. And now we sent letters to all licensed taxidermists and a follow-up phone call to 563 taxidermists. And we have 142 partners that are signed up as a vendor with us to collect samples. And so we're expecting, again, it's hinging on participation by hunters and whatnot, but we're expecting probably 6,000 samples through this partner program just this year. We do reimburse these partners $20 per sample, as long as they get the sample and all the corresponding data. These partners they're provided all the sampling supplies, the shipping materials. They'll ship these samples back to our wildlife health program, where our staff will process them and again, look for tissue integrity and then get them sent off to the lab. Folks and hunters can visit our website and they can see who is one of the partners in their local area. So what do we require of hunters in our zones? We're really pushing the notion of hunters need to make a plan. There's a lot of rules and regulations. It's always been that case with DNR and changing regulations, but more so with CWD. We have more areas affected, more hunters affected. I mentioned at least 120,000 hunters are receiving postcards because they will likely be in a CWD zone this year. We ask that they check their DPA to see if they have any mandatory testing requirements and that they comply with those requirements. And another big one is the second, or I guess third bullet point, registering their deer. So there's kind of a misconception here that hunters feel our CWD sampling effort registers their deer for them, which is not the case. So we always push that information of making sure to register your animal after you harvest it, and then make sure to get it sampled for CWD if you have to. And if you want to get your deer tested on a voluntary basis, they can make a plan and be prepared for the following. They can, find out where those partners are, request a mail-in kit. They can also make an appointment at any of our local wildlife offices to meet with wildlife staff to get a sample pulled. And we encourage hunters to process their deer as they normally would, but we also would like them to keep it separated and not mix their deer if they're awaiting test results. Some resources, again, the website is always the most up-to-date information. Even in our hunting regulations book that went to print in middle of July, there could be changes since then. And so the website is really our only tool to always have the most up-to-date information. Again, public resources, our test results page is a big hit. If folks haven't looked at it, I encourage anyone to take a peek, check it out. We have a pretty neat interactive map that shows where all the 168 positive deer are in the state, have some demographic breakdowns that folks can look at. And then we also have always the most up-to-date information of how many samples by DPA have been collected as the season goes on. The other updates I just want to touch on was the HD. No confirmed cases in Minnesota wild deer this summer or the fall so far. That's good news. And no reports of multiple dead deer in any localized area. So again, more good news. HPAI, unfortunately, it has reared its ugly head again this fall. We did a lot of effort this past spring, collaborating with other wildlifers such as the Raptor Center or Wildlife Rehab Centers, a lot of collections, collaborating with USDA Wildlife Services. The virus is pretty much saturated the state, and it's not just in one part of Minnesota. So going forward now, we have collaborated with USDA Wildlife Services national surveillance efforts. This past summer, we had summer banding operations going on where we collected swab samples from those banded birds throughout multiple watersheds. This fall, we already had our early teal hunting season where we collected some samples. And then actually this upcoming weekend is our waterfowl duck opener, where is a big push, a lot of hunters on the landscape, where we're going to collect a lot more hunter harvested samples at our check stations at boat landings and whatnot across the multiple watersheds. And then this winter, so December through February is the winter time period, we have another goal by watershed with USDA that we will be assisting to do live capture of waterfowl and sample those birds. We also respond to any morbidity and mortality events, 5 or more dead or sick birds. And then since about mid to late summer, we did have a few events that were confirmed HPAI, and we saw those in pelicans, swans, and geese. And then I do have the link here to our avian influenza DNR website, so take a peek at that. I think with that, I am open to any questions.
Hey, Eric, it's Courtney.
Hi, Courtney.
So question number 1, have you considered self-service sampling for a high path for those hunters?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Has the DNR considered self-service sampling for high path for duck hunters or collecting those samples like with little kits like you have for CWD for pathogenic avian influenza? Have you guys talked about that?
No, that hasn't been brought up.
Okay. And second question, for the CWD sampling that's done by the hunter or the taxidermist, what kind of training resources does the DNR have?
Yeah, good question. So for the mail-in kits, there is the protocol that has pictures, how to cut the samples. We have QR codes that brings you to a video that we created for any hunter to show how to extract samples. So, the website is a great resource. Even I have YouTube stuff that there's a lot of YouTube videos that even hunters put out themselves. It's kind of intriguing. But yeah, for DNR resources, we have that video, and then also in the kit itself is a direct protocol.
And at the self-service stations, can they leave the entire head in those barrels or no? Is that an option, or they are expected to collect samples?
Yep. So that's an option for those self-service sampling stations. They can either leave the head, and we have all the data tags right there at the site. A map is there, so they can show right down their harvest location, down to the section level. We also give them the option, if they want to collect the lymph node sample themselves, they can certainly do so. We've had, again, mixed successes of hunters finding the right tissue, lymph tissue or not. If they don't find lymph tissue, we do follow up with that phone call and ask if they still have the head. Sometimes we are successful, they still have the head, and then we can make arrangements to meet with them and get the tissue, let them know that they didn't have the right tissue. But more often than not, they have been pretty successful with collecting the right tissue. So a couple options for hunters to provide tissue or the head itself from the animal.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
I have a question about pelicans, geese, and ducks. are they more hardy, and are you finding where you find positives that they're not, it's not killing all of them? There is survivability, or what are you seeing that way?
Yeah, yep. As far as hardy, I don't know. I mean, that's a kind of the epidemiologist, which is not my cup of tea, unfortunately, but fortunately. Also, we have that these pelican sites in particular, not all the pelicans are dead. Not all the pelicans are neurologic. So yeah, there is survivability being seen at these sites. What that means, again, I don't have answers for that.
Erik, this is Jessica Fox. One of my questions Courtney had, so that's good. For the testing, does the testing happen do you send it to the U of M or do you guys do it with your pathologist?
So if we have carcasses collected, so in mostly our M&M, morbidity, mortality events, when we collect carcasses, that goes to the U of M diagnostic lab. The USDA sampling that we're collaborating with them, that's through their channels and those USDA labs. And that would be just a swab through like this weekend, the hunter harvested birds that we're swabbing, that'll go through USDA.
I'm very sorry, I did not clarify. The CWD testing, does that get sent to the U of M or do you guys do that in-house in your pathology lab?
Gotcha. Yep. Sorry about that. So CWD testing, when we have lymph nodes collected during the hunting season through hunter harvested deer, those are all, we have a contract in place with Colorado State University and Wisconsin VDL. So those are the two labs that we use for that. If we have a whole deer carcass, say it's a neurologic clinical deer that we collect the whole carcass, we'll bring that down to the U of M vet diagnostic lab for testing.
Okay, and one more question. You said you're working with the Raptor Center. Have they been seeing positives this fall?
You know, they've had some positives come through, but not in the sheer number like we saw this spring. So what that means also with the virus, I don't know.
Thank you.
This is Dean Compart again. Regarding southwestern Minnesota and CWD testing, there's not been really any, to my knowledge, in southwestern Minnesota, say west of 35 and south of State Highway 12, probably that area. Will there be opportunity, or will that be an area at all that people will be able to do some sampling of hunter harvested deer as part of the state program, part of your program?
Yeah, good question, Dean. Yeah, absolutely. We have now our statewide efforts, such as our mail-in kits. So I'll get to this map here. So these highlighted deer permit areas is where we're conducting CWD surveillance. But any of these white DPAs out here, that's those opportunities. The mail-in kits, our expanded partner sampling program, those hunters can utilize those methods to get their deer sampled. So, yep.
Do you know if there's been much sampling done, say if a hunter, I think the hunter up in, what is that, 681 or whatever, he just tested that one just out of the blue himself, or maybe was suspicious, but do you know if there's been much sampling down in the Southwest at all by, somebody doing a similar type thing, having a test that they just decided to send in just to check?
No, we DNR doesn't get test results from any individual hunter that would send a test to, say, Colorado State University, unless it were positive because it's a reportable disease, but not the not detected results.
Erik, this is Erik Sawatzke. I have a question with the pelicans that were found positive for HPAI. Was that done through surveillance, or was that just dead pelicans that were found and tested?
So we we have a, year-round, I guess, risk-based type surveillance, I would consider it. If we have those morbidity, mortality events that take place of 5 or more birds, and if there are especially multiple species, that raises even more alarm. But those pelicans were through those channels. The 5 or more were reported. We had staff go out to the site and were able to collect fresh carcasses for diagnostics.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions behind the things? Go ahead, President.
Erik, this is Brenda Hartkoff with the Minnesota Operators. Just wondering if you guys would be doing any work with the University of Minnesota, further evaluating their field test for C2B testing.
Yeah, yep. We are collaborating with Dr. Peter Larson and his group, the MinPro folks. We have been for a number of years. And we do have, actually next week, we have a presentation from Mark Schwabenlander on some updated stuff that we've helped them with just to get an understanding. But as we venture into more hands-on with samples, even some of our agency culling work, which is a lot more, I guess, controlled, there's interest from their part on more collaboration. So we have been working with them, and we are planning to continue working with them.
Erik, this is Dr. Peggy Ann Hawkins. I'm here from home in Northfield, Minnesota.
Okay.
I appreciate your presentation. I learned a lot more about the DNR and what's happening out there than we have before. I just got a better feel for it. I'm thinking specifically of the animal and what's right for the animal and what could happen with the animal. Having these collection sites, what process do you go through to clean up those sites so that after everybody's gone, you'll know if you've gotten some positive somethings from a site? How do we clean up, or how do we make sure that other wild deer passing through, we aren't concentrating the disease, is what I'm asking.
Gotcha. So our check station sites are where we have vehicle traffic. So more often they are a parking lot of a gas station. So it's not like a site that is out, in the woods or where many deer are passing through.
Okay, that's important to explain that to me, because I'm not familiar, and that helps me a lot to think that other deer won't just be wandering through. And if we have a concentration of disease right there, year on year, though, using the same places, you're going to have to be a little more careful, but that will take care of itself, I hope.
Yeah. Yep. Good question.
Are there any other questions for Erik? Hey, thank you, Erik, for your update.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
There's a lot of punching of things. I'm glad you did for me. All right, afternoon, farm service program update. I'm glad Erik went ahead and gives you kind of all a better picture of what's happening in the fall for wild cervid surveillance. So, and helps me to understand it as well. So this is just I'm making sure I don't trip over that. This is just, I want to give you a map overview of where farm cervid herds are located in Minnesota. We take this from our Board of Animal Health Disease Management map, and it's color coded to the different species, that is the predominant species in the herd. As we talked about last spring, with concurrent authority, we've sort of split out our database maintenance for our farm cervid program. In other words, the farmed white-tailed deer, we have that data contained in the same type of software system, but in a database that's shared with the Department of Natural Resources. So our staff does basically entry in two different systems. So the farmed white-tailed deer in that shared database, and then the rest of the farm cervid herds in the Board of Animal Health Core 1 database. So that's why we've got two tables here today to just give you an idea of number of animals we're seeing in these farm cervid herds. We've got 227 registered farm cervid herds in Minnesota, and at this point, 6,617 animals in those herds, and they break out now a little differently. All white-tailed deer herds, our largest group, 122 herds with almost 3,000 animals in them, and then 19 herds that are white-tailed deer and another cervid species, so a mix that way. And then the rest of the farm cervid herds, elk is the next largest group of herds with 68 animals, and then about 2,700 animals in those herds. So that's sort of, that's what we're looking at. You can still see the distribution throughout the state. When I started overseeing the program in 2017, we had approximately 470 some herds. So we've had pretty substantial decline in the number of farm cervid herds in Minnesota over the last 5 years. And this is a chart, unfortunately, that all of you are pretty familiar with. This is our sort of outline of our diagram of our Houston, Beltrami, CWD positive herds investigation. And we might not have showed you this graph early on, but with the detection of the Houston County CWD infected herd in the fall of 2020, we're now 2 years out. This sort of connection was created. So remember back, that was a herd. An index animal was found positive in that herd, and it traced back to the Winona County herd that's outlined right here. We looked at the traces of that Houston County herd that was depopulated in January of 2021. And then later that year, in April of 2021, we found that animals that had moved from the Winona County herd, this Beltrami County herd was quarantined as well. All these herds were quarantined. We found the Beltrami County herd had CWD positive animals, and that is, has been the focus since that time with the number of things that have gone on with that herd. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So just this summer, this Winona County herd producer has been under quarantine since October 2020, has been testing for CWD surveillance that whole time, had 47 animals submitted for testing with no CWD detected. And then in July, he chose to cull some additional does that he no longer wanted for breeding. And one animal came back as CWD positive in that herd. So we got those results in August. And, we are now working to get that herd depopulated. So this herd had been quarantined for, over a year and a half prior to that, was not able to move any animals out of that herd. We had, based on finding this herd positive and this herd positive, and because of this association, we've really traced all the animals already out of this Winona County herd. So that work was done in relationship to this investigation that started in the fall of 2020. So there's no new tracing that had to be done. No animals have moved out of that herd for over a year and a half. And so right now that herd is in place, and we're working with USDA Wildlife Services to get a contract in place for depopulation. Then, so the other things of note, we've talked about a lot of these other herds. The other things I just want to point out is we've got these last two herds currently under quarantine. And both of those producers have chosen to wait for that 5-year time period from their last exposure to a CWD positive animal. And that timeline is coming up at the beginning of October of this year. And so we have our field staff sort of notified, they're going to be going out and making that final check on those herds to look over the animals, make sure they look healthy. There's no sign of, animals aren't sick with any indications of signs that could be associated with chronic wasting disease. And we'll make sure there's no CWD test pending in those herds. And once that's done, then we'll be releasing those quarantines. So we would look to release these quarantines around October 1st, less than 2 weeks away. And then that will, wrap up all of the herds that we've dealt with in Minnesota related to this investigation. So let me just go over positive herds. So, the Winona County herd, it's been quarantined, found infected. The board did receive cooperative agreement funding from USDA for depopulating this herd. And this was pretty, if we could have optimal timing, this would be it. In other words, the herd was found, samples were taken in July, the sample results came back in August. And the USDA did have some funding left over from the fiscal year that they were trying to use up before the end of their federal fiscal year, which is the end of September. And so they couldn't spend the money in other ways. And so then came back to the board and said, would you be willing to take it as cooperative agreement funding to depopulate this herd? And of course we would. So that was very fortunate for us. And so now we are still working, we're getting the final paperwork as far as the award goes, but we're already in conversations with USDA Wildlife Services to contract for the shark shooting and depopulation. Any other questions on that infected herd before I go on? So then we've got some other CWD positive herd information. The Douglas County herd was a herd that was identified back in 2019, Courtney, I think, was identified then. That herd was depopulated. It was, I believe, 2 animals in the herd. One was CWD positive, and that site has been under a herd plan. In other words, they have to keep the fence, the perimeter enclosure intact, so there's no chance for wild cervids to get inside that enclosure. For 5 years, we did an inspection. We are inspecting those sites quarterly. The first quarter inspection was in March, and things were all good. We didn't get the second quarter inspection due to our field staff responding to high path. And then when we went back this third quarter on August 17th, we found that the gates had been taken down, and the biohazard signs were gone. And so we were working through this process to get this corrected as soon as we can. Unfortunately, there's nobody living on the site. Is that right, Steve?
I understand.
Yeah. And the producer is not somebody we can get in touch with. We have now, the owner of the property was his mother. She's not available. Now there's a power of attorney, which is the brother of this original producer. And the sheriff ended up, talking with that person to deliver the information is who we found. And so now we're working to get the contact information for that person to go through with them the requirements for maintaining this property or this enclosure and getting that back up and, the gates on it. So that was disconcerting. Meeker County, just a little bit better news. This site was identified as a premises had a CWD infected herd on it, identified in 2017. The herd was depopulated. The owner has been working, under the herd plan. It was cleaned and decontaminated, and we've been inspecting that site regularly as well. The producer met all the requirements and has reached that 5-year time limit of what we require for maintaining the enclosures. And so basically we have lifted that quarantine on that site because we're now at the end. He's met all the requirements of the herd plan. Any questions on those? So kind of focus on our last CWD infected herd, the Beltrami County CWD infected herd identified in April of 2021. We've gone through kind of the history of this. The producer was on a rented facility for his animals and was under quarantine at the during the fall of 2020, winter of 2021, started experiencing pretty high mortality in his herd. Had decided not to kill and test the exposed animals, but stay quarantined. But in experiencing mortality, he went against the requirements of the quarantine to keep those animals within the enclosure and, dragged them to a site of public land. Ultimately, this is just kind of a map of some preliminary locations where this is a nearby property owned, and then the animals were dragged onto this abandoned, public land. And some of the work that was done by the DNR to kind of determine what they were finding out there. So the board has then, this was illegal, and the board then moved forward with litigation for this. And so we talked about this an administrative order, basically this early this winter or February earlier this year. The judge granted the board's motion for summary disposition, and then you all kind of discussed this with Dr. Thompson, I believe, at the April 12th board meeting. And then in June 9th, the board filed a complaint with the district court through our attorney general contact that, our representation. And he just attended a pre-hearing conference September 9th with the Beltrami County judge, and we're awaiting a scheduling. So in other words, the judge found our favor, you concurred with that finding. We're now going after damages and costs, and that's the next steps in the sequence. We have had some preliminary discussions with the producer's lawyer, but we're waiting for the schedule to make our next moves. Just here's an example of the fence that was constructed around that area, and the Board of Animal Health entered into a joint powers of agreement with the DNR to construct the Beltrami County fence. And we're just wanting to revisit that joint powers of agreement again. So I made contact with the DNR or asked them if we could set up meetings to kind of discuss that going further. What the steps are for basically covering the costs of that fence, which the Board of Animal Health and the DNR agreed to share. And then they're also working on a county easement. In other words, if you see that picture, there's this land. The fence picture was taken during the drier season, and they were able to construct this fence, fortunately, because it was dry. Otherwise, there's a lot of bog and wetland. The easiest access to this fence to make sure it's maintained, the DNR is planning to maintain it for 20 years. The University of Minnesota MinPro group is interested in doing some research on this site. They would like access to it. And so the easiest way is through this private land access is the closest sort of way to get vehicles there and then get to that fence. And so we're working with the county for an easement for permanent access. So asking for an easement from that private landowner for the fence, and estimating we would pay the landowner $2,000 for a permanent easement, and we would split that cost 4 ways. So, and as I understand, the county has a final access agreement, and they're going to be presenting that to the private landowner soon, perhaps with a local representative. So.
And Helena,
Yeah.
the landowner is not the producer, correct? Different parties.
It's related to the producer, but it's not the producer. Okay. Other questions on that? Okay. And compliance, and I'll give you kind of a brief overview. We had talked before about the Mille Lacs County herd, the registration was canceled last year. And we worked through an agreement to get that herd depopulated. The herd was dispersed or depopulated in early February. All the animals had tested not detected for chronic wasting disease. Before we got to that point, this herd owner had sold some animals to 2 other producers. And one producer put those animals down, tested, not detected. The other producer had purchased 12 animals. 5 of those animals have now been killed and tested, not detected, and 7 remain on that site and should be planned to be killed this fall. Yeah, a new herd, the Sandy County herd. This herd has had issues of compliance over the last year and a half. And so we did go ahead and issue a herd cancellation notice to this herd owner. And that was just August 23rd. And we're in conversations currently now. The herd owner does not want to disperse or depopulate his herd. And so we're looking at potentially a compliance agreement as a next step to try to get this person, to get this person into compliance with regulations with some of the circumstances they relate. So we have one other herd. We're having compliance agreements. This is a herd owner in northern Minnesota and has primarily paperwork issues, just not tracking, not getting paperwork in time, movement records. We do have some accuracy on CAV testing submission forms as well. So we're working with this herd, we're putting this herd on their compliance agreement as well. To try to get that. Any questions on any of that? Okay, and I just wanted to remind everybody, when we see Erik Hildebrand put up the map of some of the surveillance areas they're working with, where they're going to be testing. The board tracks CWD confirmed cases in the wild because part of our regulations are that once CWD is found in the wild, then we have to respond with additional restrictions on farm cervid herds and proximity to those wild animals. So this just reminds you about the board's CWD endemic area. And this is currently what the board's endemic area looks like. These are points, circles, boundaries, 15-mile boundaries around known confirmed cases of CWD in the wild. And so any farm cervid herds that are found within these areas then have additional movement restrictions, primarily not being able to move any animals into their herd or move any animals out of their herd to other locations in Minnesota. We don't restrict interstate movement or export for these herds, but within Minnesota. So we'll be looking at the fall hunter harvest season, any of the special hunts and sharpshooting the DNR plans to do. And once we get the, we exchange that information with where the locational data, where they find the wild cervids. And once we get that information, in the past, I'd like to sort of do this all at once, so we're not confusing everybody by adding on during the hunting season, but then update the endemic areas, identify which herds are now within these boundaries and then get them notified that they have additional movement restrictions. Okay, some of the other topics, the board and DNR are still working on the memorandum of understanding for concurrent authority. The dates, we received that back in August 4th. Took time to review and add some additional components to it, returned it to the DNR on August 19th, and we're waiting to hear back from them. I hope we could hear back from them by the end of August, but no such luck. And we're hoping we're getting to kind of a final point for us as far as there's no additional components that we have to add to the agreement. It would just be getting back any comments that they have on what we've added and, if they have anything more that they put in there. So I think we're, at the end of contributing items. It's just having, them review what we've added. So anyway, that's, hopefully we will be hearing from them soon. They thought they would have it reviewed by upper echelon at the end of last week, but we haven't seen it. CWD cooperative agreements, I had sent those copies of just a summary of the cooperative agreements. This year, USDA put out a call for proposals earlier this year, and they had $4.8 million available for funding for proposals to manage and manage CWD. I think there's another word in there, but anyway, just for farm cervid projects. And so we work with our partners, at the university, Trace First, and then, through, other states to get these cooperative agreements submitted, and we're successful in getting them all funded for this next year. And so currently, we have, indication that we're receiving the awards. We don't have the final paperwork, I think, on 2 of them, but we'll be working to then get these contracts in place so that, we can start, spending the money, start the projects and start spending the money. And, I don't know if you have any questions about those specific projects. I'm happy to answer that. And then, what happened, the way they can do that then is because we submitted proposals, they can attach that indemnity funding to a proposal, so, and award us that, so we can then use that money for the indemnity. So some of that funding includes the indemnity for the one owner. And that's what I have for an update. So any questions?
The Meeker County deer farm that is 5 years is coming up.
Right.
To your knowledge, has there been a MinPro? Have they done some testing with their RT Quick at that facility at all? Or
No, there hasn't been any testing. We had been interested in working with them on submitting a proposal for this cooperative agreement funding season. And it got a little farther along, and some of the researchers were leaving for research out of the country. And so we couldn't get a proposal through, but there is interest certainly by the legislature and RT Quick and, potentially testing farm service. I know that, and starting to use this test. It's fraught with some concerns about, be careful what you look for and what will you do and, what you find, so.
We did incorporate language into the herd agreement that was signed by the owner, the board, and USDA that would allow Minpro to collect environmental samples.
Not on the Meeker County one, but.
That was after that one.
Yeah.
So we started doing that after, my apologies.
Yeah.
I got a question, like.
Yep.
Why is it a 15-mile radius? Why isn't it smaller than that?
Right, so if you look at our regulations, it says a 10-mile radius, or an area greater, as if the board determines it's needed, something like that, right? When we, started, identifying, these endemic areas with the first CWD positives that were found in 2016 by the DNR, that's when we, started, sort of publishing this. And so it was 10 miles. Now the DNR did some work by radio collaring deer in that southeastern Minnesota area. And they came before the board in the, late winter of 2018 to kind of relay that, research findings, and basically told us that the average daily movements of deer in that area, 15 miles encompasses most of the average daily movements of deer in that area. And so they, proposed or recommended to us, or asked the board to consider expanding that circumference around those points, because the deer in that area move to a greater extent than just that 10-mile radius. And so the board did agree to expand that. So now going forward, when we find a confirmed case, we apply the 15 miles. Now, that's data collected in southeastern Minnesota. I don't know. We'd have to ask DNR if it necessarily applies to average ranging movements of deer in other parts of the state and other parts of the habitat. I can't say that, but right now we're 15-mile areas. So if we go back to that, these are locations, western Minnesota, previously, these are the new areas just from last fall where TAVD was first found in wild cervid. So it's this area here, the animal was almost on the border with North Dakota. This Grand Rapids area is brand new. CWD had not been detected there before. And then we're seeing expanding area in this Dakota area, and that was applied just 2 years ago. First infected positive deer that was found in that area. We're seeing, expansion of that area.
Do we have any registered cervid herds in the southwestern part of the state?
Yes, Go back to the map. You know, they're a little bit bare here, but you can see the distribution there. Great, thank you. Just pressing.
So quick compliance update. My name is Myah Walker. Give you a little background for me, since most of you in this room probably don't know who I am. I like to use the tagline that I'm a city girl gone ag. So born and raised in Minnesota, down in the Twin Cities, went to University of Minnesota for my undergraduate in animal science, and also my master's in public health. Was introduced to the poultry industry through the Midwest Poultry Consortium, and I spent 13 years in the egg laying industry as their compliance, food safety, quality person for several companies before I came to the board at the end of June. So I'm a newbie. And then my family, mom, dad, sister, 2 pet kids. So yeah. So some compliance history about the board. This is what I asked the annual reports for from Michael, just to go back a few years to see kind of where our non-compliances, our notices of violations and corrective orders come from, and our civil penalties along the years. And I know the font is really small, but I just kind of wanted to give you a brief snapshot of how much we spend time with like the Cervids, which is big extended line, compared to all of our other programming areas. And then if you take the Cervids out, what it looks like as far as where that goes. And there's a lot of variables on where and why we spend time in different program areas. But the biggest thing from here and the biggest takeaway I want to say is there's a lot of variability on how we are enforcing our rules and regulation in Minnesota, which is part of the reason why they came up with a role, my role, for the board agency. So each program, from my understanding, kind of handled their own compliance actions previously. Whether it's notices of violation, you have civil penalties, debt referrals, suspensions and cancellations. They all did it in different ways. Who did that varied a lot. So there's just a lot of variability there from the office level all the way down to the field staff. And so with that, the board came up with an idea that, you know what, we just need one person that can help manage some consistency with the board and enforcement. So they came up with a compliance unit supervisor role, which is what I was hired for to do. And so general rule responsibilities and duties that we're looking at here is really just enforcing the animal health statutes and rules, assisting field staff with the compliance issues, different questions and concerns that pop up, developing training materials, and helping with coming up with some compliance best practices. And then again, bringing that uniformity to the enforcement actions that we have at the board. So under me, we have our compliance team. Myself from the team office, Team North, we have Tim Schultz and Chad Carlson. They're ag advisors. And we have Team Central, Brian Ziemer and Terry Sistad. We have ag advisor, ag consultant, and then our Team South location, we are looking to hire here shortly. So kind of what is my vision and goals for compliance? The first thing that people think of when you think of compliance is that like mean police officer coming in to tell people what they're doing wrong, the gotcha moments. And for me, my vision is to get us to a point where we're not secret. My department isn't seen as the bad guy. I've had a lot of conversations with some field staff already, and they're very scared to, or don't like issuing NOVs and corrective actions and don't like writing them up. And I just like to say that those are tools in the toolbox helping to educate our producers, the folks that we work with on what the rules and regulations are in Minnesota. That we do have, even though the board doesn't create the rules, we don't write the rules, we still are in charge of enforcing them. And so even in our mission, through education and cooperation with everybody that's at play here, I just want to get us to a point where we can just be like superheroes and coming in and helping folks do what they need to do, and making sure that we're doing that effectively across all programs. So that's the vision. The other piece is compliance is not a naughty word. We really are just, again, about obeying an order, a rule, or a request. And so we can get that into the minds of the field staff, into the folks that we're working with, whether they're breeders, they're elk, deer farmers, poultry folks. Compliance isn't bad. If they're in the business of doing this, they have to comply with the rules. So you might as well all be on the same side of things and do things accordingly. And so some of the goals, based on the observations I've seen, again, I've only been here 2 months, so I'm still in observation mode. But I want to make sure that we can have compliance actions completed by the right people. So there's different levels to what we're doing when it comes to the compliance actions. So who owns which step in the process, looking at each program, each position within under the different programs, who's doing what. Part of that being one of the things that I've noticed a lot is who is writing our notices of violations in the field. When you are doing an inspection or taking inventory of something, or you're on an investigation, something isn't going right. You have sometimes in some programs, the corporate offices, us at the office is writing the NOV, or you have the field staff doing that. So for me, I would say whoever has eyes on the issue that's going wrong, they should be the person that's writing the notice of violation, talking with the producer, letting them know and educating them in that. It's an educational tool of here's what you're doing wrong, here's how we can fix it and move forward. Another goal of mine is consistency with our compliance actions. So what actions do we use when? And talking through that in a matter of when is it appropriate to write an NOV versus not? We have some people who pick and choose. Some would rather just have a conversation versus writing a notice of violation. When do we actually implement a civil penalty versus not? Using an actual matrix for that so that we're consistent across programs. And then when do we choose to escalate issues so that it goes, if it has to go beyond a civil penalty, that we have consistency in how we're doing that. And then consistency with compliance enforcement. So again, how and when we choose to document the compliance actions specifically. So those are a couple goals that I've come up with thus far. More observations that I have to date, looking at standardizing our compliance documentation. There's a lot of variability when you're reading the field staff write-ups and their reports on what they're putting in those reports, whether pictures are used or not. And so figuring out how we can better standardize what that looks like person to person across different programs. Streamlining our compliance actions process flow. So again, going back to first step is we're educating the producer. Second step being we're issuing an NOV if they're still having the same issue. And then how do we continue to escalate down that process flow? And then how can we reduce the repeat violations by utilizing more progressive compliance actions? There's a lot of the reports that I've gone through where, oh, this person's fence is not as high as it should be again, or oh, this person didn't do the paperwork properly again. At what point do we say enough is enough and we have to issue something a little more severe as an action? And then lastly, just improving the turnaround time for compliance actions. And a lot of that has to do with the paperwork side of things from the office. Making sure that in real time, at the time of an incident or something's going on, you can give them that paperwork right away. Following up on it in a timely manner, figuring out what those timelines should be and how long it should take. I know depending on what we're juggling, whether it's an emergency disease response, that could take away from our everyday duties and inspections and things that we have going on. So figuring out how we can balance both of those things and improve timelines overall. So that was very quick. Like I said, but any questions for me or comments, curiosity?
Welcome.
Thank you.
This is Peggy Hawkins out in Northfield.
Yeah.
And I love your positivity, and that's exactly what compliance people, quality assurance people need to have, is that positive attitude, that it's paperwork, it's reality, it needs to be fixed, and it needs to be consistent. I think you're the right person for the job, so good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Myah. Veronica, we're ready for you.
Last but not least, right, any animal update, and I fully recognize that what's standing between all of us and adjournment is me. So yes, I'm Veronica Bartsch. I joined the board in May as a veterinarian. I received my DVM from the University of Minnesota in 2004, my NPH from the U in 2020. I was in companion animal veterinary medicine for 18 years, in both private practice and in shelter medicine before I came to the board. I currently oversee not only the companion animal programs, but rabies and biologics as well. So I want to talk about two main things that we've been working on above and beyond our normal program work. And one is to give you an update on the Companion Animal Advisory Task Force that the board set out creating last December in response to the MDMA's request. The task force has met 3 times since the beginning of the year, twice since I've been here. We've had some shifting in members of the task force as people have left roles in organizations or various time commitments came up. But this is the current list of members of the task force. We do have 2 open positions. One that I would like to fill, someone from the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine, and then one that I would like to have another companion animal industry member. So either another breeder or someone involved in boarding or training. We're pretty heavy on the side of animal welfare organizations. I think for this task force to be balanced, we need to have all voices present. So that, yeah,
I can help with that.
Okay. And my goal is to have those 2 positions filled by the end of the year. So that might be efficient. So we identified a list of concerns that the task force members had. And then in the first meeting, and then in subsequent meetings, we've been looking at these concerns in depth. The first one that we looked at was the lack of oversight on a state level for foster-based animal rescues. Now, these are organizations that do everything that kennels or our definition of kennels under state statutes do. However, they don't have a physical building where animals are housed and taken care of. So they're soliciting for unwanted animals, they're providing care, and then they are subsequently reselling or adopting these animals. Because they don't have that physical facility, they are exempt from our kennel statutes and inspections. They do have to follow local ordinances. Generally, that is about how many animals people can have in their private residences. And obviously, they have to follow
the state's Pet and Companion Animal Welfare Act, the Animal Cruelty Statute, and then our import policies or regulations that we have on any dogs and cats we bring into the state. We talked in the group about if this was an actual issue, or if we were looking for something to regulate that potentially isn't an issue. You know, and yes, we can identify that there are issues with foster-based rescue groups. They are few and far between for sure, but when they do come out, as you can see from these headlines, they tend to be large. They tend to involve a lot of animals and a lot of disease or death. They garner a lot of media attention and public attention. And generally, we get some outcry on the board from the public as to why we aren't doing about this. The other thing that we've noted is there has been an increase in disease incidents as well associated with foster-based animal rescues. So in 2021, the entire year, we had 18 investigations of canine brucellosis. This year, as of September 13th, we had 35 investigations. I had 28 of those are open. As of Monday, we closed a couple yesterday as animals were euthanized. And all but 2 of those investigations were associated with foster-based rescues that have imported dogs into the state from either areas in the south where the disease is endemic or Native American reservations in South Dakota. The concerns that the task force identified, you know, are really the same points of inspection that we have for our kennel facilities. So looking at housing and sanitation, veterinary care and disease transmission, and then animal welfare. So after a lot of discussion, the group was able to come up with some summary points and general consensus regarding oversight at the state level of foster-based rescues. And in general, the thought was, yes, this has to happen. They do recommend that someone takes a closer look at these organizations and provides some oversight. The group recognized 2 different ways that could happen. One would be, you know, being better about enforcing our existing policies and statutes. And again, that would be out of our hands as the Board of Animal Health because we don't have statutory authority to regulate these groups. So it would be a lot of education and outreach from nonprofits and local law enforcement and those organizations. The other option that seemed to be more favorable is to include these foster-based rescues in either new legislation or modified legislation with our kennel laws. So again, that would be opening up statutes or having someone write and pass legislation. The second summary point was that there needs to be some sort of central or standardized guidance for companion animal statutes and regulations. There's a lot of conflicting opinions and ideas out there, and people are looking towards the board to be kind of the authority to be able to say, you know, yes, and this is how you really should do it. The last summary point was we definitely need to increase or change import regulations for dogs and cats that are being brought into the state. And that actually is going to be our next topic, our in-depth topic, to really kind of suss out what those requirements should be, what diseases we want to focus on, and who would be doing the enforcement. So I hope our next meeting, I want to get one more in before the end of the year. So I'm hoping November, December. So it's a busy time with holidays, but we'll get it in. The second thing I wanted to talk about was a proposed bill that we were made aware of that would create what's called an Office of Animal Protection, or OAP. So this bill was developed by two people who have experience with animal crimes and animal welfare cases. One of them is with law enforcement and the other is has experience with animal control agencies. They created this document outside of their work roles, so it was just a need that they saw. It is fully jacketed, and they are currently looking for someone to author it for this to be introduced in the next session. We found out about it because the MBMA asked the board to give an opinion on what this looked like, we thought. And so Dr. Glaser, Dr. Jopp, and I, along with Dr. Nancy Peterson and Kelly Andrews from MBMA, met with the two people that created this and really had a very productive session. They were open to our questions about wording, our suggestions about changes, and really listened to our points of concern and shaped it to what we were asking. So it was a really valuable meeting. So the bill itself would create this OAP under as a new division of the Department of Public Safety. So that would give the people in this office law enforcement capabilities. They want to create animal protection officers that would be similar to conservation officers with the DNR. So they would have the same powers of filing criminal charges, being able to seize property, conduct searches, and really enforce animal cruelty and welfare statutes. They also would be employees of the state. So they would have to follow and fall under state statutes and rules versus, opinion. So right now in the state, we don't have a centralized agency to respond to animal welfare, animal neglect issues. Again, that's out of the purview of the Board of Animal Health. And so it's falling on local law enforcement right now. We definitely see a lot of variability across the state at how these things are responded to, if they're responded to, and then enforcement of the law as well. And some of that is our law enforcement across the state just doesn't know what to do. They haven't been trained. They don't know what they're looking for. The OAP would create that central point of conduct that people could go to for resources and direction, how to investigate these crimes and enforce the laws. They also want to create standardized training through the post board for law enforcement, as well as training for animal control agents. So again, we have more standardization across the state of how this is responded to. They included in their bill, which is interesting, this office would regulate and inspect foster-based animal rescues and shelters, kennels, impounds that are owned or operated, managed by municipalities. So again, these are groups that fall outside of our kennel laws and currently have no regulation or oversight except on the municipality level. They also would do some disaster relief coordination, and again, they want to set kind of a standardization of training across the board for that. So this chart compares the OAP bill with the CAB bill. The CAB bill supporters are planning on trying to get this reintroduced in the next session again to give a stab at it. You can read the slide, but there are some main differences. One being the Office of Animal Protection bill really is a complement to the work that the Board of Animal Health is doing right now. It doesn't take away or alter any of our current responsibilities, where the CAB bill would take away the commercial breeder responsibility for enforcement of the commercial breeder laws, and it put us in more of an administrative capacity only. The other difference is how they define the animals that are affected by this law. This, I think, is is very important. So the OIP bill is very specific that it does not include livestock species, period. The CAB bill leaves some wiggle room, and they recognize that and potentially are thinking about changing it to only say dogs. But right now, it is that kind of open-ended where you can see, you know, the potential of getting livestock species that people keep as pets under that bill. The Office of Animal Protection bill has not support, I guess, but it's not opposed by the Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety. He came out and said that. He suggested that the Department of Agriculture have a similar stance, that we certainly aren't opposed to anything in this bill or potential bill, especially after our meeting with the writers. There is definitely a need and a gap in, you know, laws and regulations, and this bill would really answer a lot of that and work cooperatively. We'll see. Any questions?
I have one for you.
Yeah.
If I can jump right in. So with this, one question I have and one thought to consider, and I don't know if you guys brought it up to the, I guess they're not technically authors, but right, whatever. Yeah. Since there's no longer someone in the veterinary diagnostic lab that had that forensic pathology skills, to me, if you're going to have something like this, you need to have that funded to go along with it, because you bring this stuff up, but you don't have anyone to support you. That'd be like having a crime scene with no medical examiner to help support your findings. So I feel like if this is something they're going to pursue, they should like take that into consideration as part of the bill, that needs to be funded.
Yeah, definitely. And right now it's written fairly open. And they did that on purpose. So things like that could be tweaked and added as people identified in these. And that's definitely something I can take back to them. Interested to hear about.
Would this person be in the metro, or would they respond to Greater Minnesota?
Greater Minnesota. Yeah, so they want this to be completely integrated in the Department of Public Safety and be, you know, kind of like state patrol, where, you know, they have a central office, but they're stationed kind of across the state.
Methods of funding, was that discussed at all, or how they could raise some additional dollars? I know the companion animal bill, well, last one, they were wanting to be able to license plates and be able to be funded by the state, but also have this opportunity to bring in funds from outside. And to me, that gets a little sketchy as to who's running this or who's influencing.
Right. And they initially, they did include that, where they too were looking at license plates, and that was, they took that again from the DNR and the conservation plates that you can get. And after discussion, they decided, yes, they agree that, you know, it muddies the waters of funding a little bit and permission. And so they took that completely out of the bill. Ellie, did you have a question?
I do. Would this proposal erase the part of chapter 343 that establishes main agents appointed by a volunteer agency that are accountable to nobody?
Right, and that would need to be addressed because there would be redundancy. It doesn't specifically talk about that, but they're aware that that is out there and it would need to be refilled. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I didn't see it as small font, but how are horses discussed when you guys chatted?
Yeah, and you know, horses get kind of added at the side, and I think part of that is the majority of the group have a small animal, companion animal expertise and experience. We did talk about the need again, for welfare, oversight for horses, but, you know, unfortunately, we didn't specifically address them. In the
I know they can, because they can go either way, right?
Yes,
Depending on our livestock. So I was just curious if you guys chatted about that or what they're.
Yeah, briefly, we mentioned that, yes, you know, they could be considered companion animals, should be included in consideration, but.
Yeah, with horses, there's so many, the racing organizations, you know, they are listed as livestock though. USDA says they're livestock, and we know they're companion animals too, but you got to treat them like livestock legally, I believe.
Anything else? All right, thank you for your opinion. So before we adjourn, looks like we need to pick the next meeting date. We generally have that meeting in December.
Great. I think we try to stay on the early half. Holidays.
Is Wednesday still the best day of the week?
Yeah, it is.
The 7th or 14th then?
Better day for you.
What, either Monday or Tuesday, I have more flexibility.
Yeah.
Is Tuesday still work for you? Okay, I'm sorry, Ian.
Nope, that's
I
fine.
keep shifting,
flexible.
I keep shifting the bar.
Dr. Hawkins, did you hear that Dr. Fox said that Tuesdays work better for her?
Okay, the 6th or the 13th then. My calendar's open, so somebody else is gonna have to.
6 would be fine for me.
I got a travel meeting on the 6th open canvas. So, yeah, 13 would be better, but if you have to do 6, I think 6.
Time for the 6th.
No, that's fine, no, that's totally fine.
Like it works for everybody else.
No, that's fine.
And that week, on the 13th, I have blown out and I'm getting pulls. So Dr. Hawkins would have to take over.
I'll go out to your place and help.
Erin, can we, as far as the location,
I was just gonna ask if you guys had any suggestions or usually, we've done the VDL the last few years.
right?
It's a little bit small to have it there, but somewhere in the cities.
We went to that Kelly farm one time.
Oliver Kelly.
Oliver Kelly, they had a nice facility,
Mhm.
you know, there's good
Yep.
parking that time of the year. You're not
Sure.
gonna have a lot of other people. I would assume, so maybe not.
They've done recently a lot of, like upgrades, you know, to that facility. I mean, it is really nice.
Yeah, we can shoot for that.
Okay, let's tentatively plan for that. Say that. Albertville?
Yeah, that's right.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. And then before we adjourn the meeting, Erin, is there any details for the tour?
We'll
Directions?
start it pretty soon. The tour guide will just come down and, yep,
Okay.
yep, I'll just let her know we're done, so.
So there's a tour afterwards if anybody is interested. December 6th. Okay.
So I'm jealous about that, but you guys have a good time.
Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you, everybody.
Good meeting.